Chapter 26-23 Playing a Game of Go. Chapter 26-23 Playing a Game of Go. To cross the river? Ling Han asked in astonishment. Isn't that simple? This river was only 30 or so meters in width, so couldn't it be crossed with a casual leap? It's not that simple, the burly man who looked around 30 years old replied. His eyes were clouded by a layer of black that radiated with an aura of bloodlust. This was a sign that he had been affected by the black energy of this place. However, he didn't attack Ling Han, and this was because he had been intimidated by the invisible might of Ling Han. However, he didn't realize this himself. He continued, If you're a 7th heaven, 8th heaven, or 9th heaven celestial king, you can naturally cross this river with ease. However, those beneath these levels will be obliterated into smithereens by the river water if they try to forcefully cross. Huh! It's that powerful? Ling Han casually asked. I know, right? Otherwise, how could we have been stopped here? The burly man said. He pointed his chin in the direction of the elder and said, He isn't a real person, but he's unbelievably powerful. He's guarding that bridge, and those who try to force their way over will only be killed and tossed into the river by him. Of course, it's still possible to cross the bridge if you want. You just have to beat him in a game of Go first. However, this isn't any ordinary game of Go. You'll know if you try. Pooh! As if providing further information for this remark, the person sitting before the elder suddenly spat a mouthful of blood in a violent manner. His face instantly became as white as a sheet. Thud, thud, thud. He stumbled back 7 steps, after which he swayed for a short while, and almost collapsed headfirst into the ground. Defeated again! Sigh. Moving the pieces requires one to use their divine sense. Once the pieces are eaten, their divine sense will also be wounded. This person has already lost 3 times, so it's very likely that his divine sense has already been wounded to the limit. Sigh. I've already been here for 16 years, yet I've only seen 7 people successfully crossing this bridge. This is far too difficult. Everyone shook their head in disappointment. They had all challenged the elder to a game of Go before, yet which of them hadn't suffered humiliating defeat? Which of them hadn't had their divine sense wounded? Ling Han's interest was involuntarily piqued. He strode over and sat down before the old man. Who is this brat? He's a new arrival, right? I haven't seen him before. The youth knows no fear. Does he think this will be easy? They all chattered among themselves. Shut up! The Empress chided in a cold voice. Just who do you think you? Someone instinctively retorted, but upon seeing the Empress' stunningly beautiful and aloof face, they couldn't help but feel stifled. How could they still speak? How beautiful! How can such a breathtaking beauty exist in the world? The Empress' peerless beauty instantly elicited cries of astonishment from the crowd. Many people stared at her with greed and lust. They were all affected by the black energy, so they had all become bloodthirsty and fearless, with their senses of respect and apprehension greatly reduced. She's mine! A person shouted as they immediately lunged over, grabbing at the Empress. She was only a measly 4th heaven, so capturing her would naturally be as easy as could be. Whoosh! There was a flash of ice-cold light as the Empress drew her sword, slashing down at that person. How could that person have known that the Empress, a 4th heaven celestial king, actually possessed a celestial tool? He simply thought that he could suppress the Empress with his 6th heaven cultivation. Moreover, because he had been afraid of others snatching her first, he had lunged over with all his might. He hadn't just reached over, as that would have increased the risk of others snatching the Empress away first. Anyhow, apart from 9th heaven celestial kings, who else could block the might of celestial tools? With a single slash, that person had already been cut in 2 at the waist. Blood sprayed through the air, after which intestines and organs also started to spill out. Death soon followed. Everyone was rendered speechless with shock. That was a 6th heaven celestial king! Yet, a 4th heaven celestial king had actually killed them with a single slash? Who could believe this? After mulling over this carefully, they immediately discovered that it wasn't the Empress who was powerful enough to kill the sixth heaven celestial king in a single strike. Instead, it was because the celestial king had been too rash, and it was because of the deadly weapon in the Empress' hand. That was a celestial tool. Their gazes became even more fervent. Not only was she a peerless beauty, but she even possessed a powerful celestial tool. Who could resist such temptation? This was the Celestial King Graveyard, a realm with no rules and regulations. Moreover, these people had all been affected by the black energy, so they were more so reckless and unafraid. However, Ling Han didn't pay any attention to this. The Empress was almost at the fifth heaven, so combined with the might of the celestial tool, she was more than capable of dealing with these people. After all, they were only sixth heaven celestial kings at most. Indeed, those at the seventh heaven could directly cross the river and leave. He calmly sat down, beginning a game of Go with the elder. In this game of Go, he took on the black pieces, meaning that he had the first move. The elder naturally assumed the white pieces. After placing a single piece, Ling Han immediately let out a soft exclamation. This was because the piece surprisingly absorbed a fraction of his divine sense, causing the piece to become a part of him. The elder continued to smoke his water pipe as he contested territory with Ling Han. Pa pa pa. In the beginning, they were both lightning quick as they placed their pieces. After 30 or so moves, however, they started to slow down. There were more and more things to consider and calculate. Not only that, but much of Ling Han's divine sense had also been absorbed after completing the 30 or so moves. This naturally affected his calculation and decision-making abilities. He became slower and slower, with each move consuming much more time. However, there was a sandglass beside the Go board, and the sand inside it would start to flow each time it was his turn to move. The sand inside would completely flow to the bottom after around 30 seconds. If he failed to make his move before this, it would count as his defeat. Ling Han made maximum use of this time, not making his move until the moment the time was about to expire. Both he and the elder remained calm and composed. Meanwhile, the Empress was unleashing her deadly fury, with her divine sword dancing around, and causing her to appear like a celestial maiden gracefully dancing among the clouds. However, her dance was one that ended life after life. Chapter 26-24 Divine Fluid Raging Lightning. Chapter 26-24 Divine Fluid Raging Lightning. Before long, Ling Han and the elder approached the endgame. In this stage, both parties would rapidly consume the pieces of their opponent. Thus, the game would be filled with a sense of killing intent. Ling Han's brows were tightly knitted together. With each black piece that was consumed, his divine sense would suffer another blow, causing him to feel increasing discomfort. If it had been someone with a weaker divine sense, their mind and willpower would have extremely likely already collapsed at this point. If it weren't a failure to place a piece in time, it would be a severe wound causing them to misplace a piece, thereby leading to a complete collapse and eventual loss. It was no wonder that few people could defeat this elder in a game of Go. It was simply because their divine sense wasn't powerful enough. With the learning ability of celestial kings, even if they didn't know how to play Go, they could easily become a master after watching a few games. Thus, this wasn't the main obstacle that the celestial kings faced. Fortunately, Ling Han's divine sense had already been tempered by the indestructible Heaven Scroll, which allowed it to become as stable as a mountain. Thus, he remained unfazed and unaffected. He placed piece after piece, resolutely defending his advantage and not allowing greed to cloud his judgment. After another 30 minutes, the results were already set in stone. Ling Han won by 3.5 pieces. Pass, the elder said. Ling Han smiled faintly. Even though his divine sense had been wounded to a certain degree, the process of the game had also been equivalent to a process of tempering his divine sense. Thus, he had also received some benefits as well. Looking around, he discovered that the surroundings were already covered in blood, with heads and corpses littering the ground. The Empress had already concluded her slaughter. However, not everyone had been killed, though the people closest to them were a whopping 50 kilometers away, not daring to get any closer to the brutal murderer and the Empress. "Are you two going to have a game of Go with the old man, or do you want to enter the celestial guest residence?" Ling Han asked. "I'll have a game," the Empress said as she sheathed her sword. She sat down before the old man to play a game of Go with him. Meanwhile, bewitching Maiden Rose shook her head. She was most afraid of racking her brains. The Empress started a game with the old man. In fact, she was extraordinarily skilled in Go, far more skilled than Ling Han. Moreover, her divine sense was also extremely tough, so even though she was affected a little, she still won by a huge advantage of 5 pieces. They both won the right to use the bridge to cross the river. They exchanged a smile before holding hands and walking onto the bridge. The river flowed very slowly, yet they could clearly see the black lightning crackling within it. Even through the bridge, they could still feel an overwhelming pressure bearing down on them. "Ha!" Ling Han suddenly stopped in his tracks, staring at the river and saying, "This seems similar to the blue lunar lightning trees from before." The Empress' eyes lit up, and she exclaimed, "Perhaps this river contains another lightning element secret technique?" "Let's have a look," Ling Han said. Looking down like this, they could only see the arcs of lightning within the river. However, they couldn't rely on this to obtain the secret technique. Just like in the forest, they had to first find the formation eye and familiarize themselves with the layout of the area. Only then could they absorb the lightning into their bodies. Otherwise, they would only be attacked by the lightning. Upon seeing them walk onto the bridge, the celestial kings that had fled into the distance finally dared to return. However, when they saw the 2 people walking back and forth on the bridge, they couldn't help but bare their teeth in frustration. Were these 2 people going to cross the bridge or not? Could they give a clear indication? Just wandering around back and forth. Were they trying to frighten the others or what? The people who had beaten the elder in the past had all crossed the bridge without any hesitation. Which of them had been like these 2? Did they find this fun or what? However, they didn't dare to speak up against Ling Han and the Empress. After all, what if the Empress suddenly developed bloodlust again? Who could endure that? Here! Ling Han had been observing the bridge the entire time. This was a wooden bridge, yet different sections of it had been painted in different colors, separating the bridge into distinct brackets, some big and some small. Each bracket varied in size. Right now, he was standing in a bracket that seemingly commanded the entire bridge. He instantly felt a different sensation. He shared his discovery with the Empress, who also walked over to observe the surroundings from this angle. After a while, they sat down and extended their hands. Crackle! As if being manipulated by some mystical power, the black lightning in the river instantly shot into the air, smashing toward Ling Han and the Empress. The originally calm river immediately became tumultuous, with countless arcs of lightning zapping around and enveloping Ling Han and the Empress, transforming them into balls of lightning. "Divine fluid raging lightning!" Ling Han and the Empress exclaimed in their minds. After entering their bodies, these arcs of black lightning also transformed into numerous symbols. This was the materialization of the regulations of the Great Tao. Azure wood chaotic lightning, divine fluid raging lightning. "This is the act of imbuing the 5 elements into lightning," Ling Han said. He couldn't help but sing words of praise, saying, "How incredible and wonderful! The person who flawlessly combined the great Tao of lightning with the 5 elements, and created this cultivation technique is far too genius." The Empress nodded in agreement. Cultivation techniques had been developed for heaven knew how many years, so it was only natural that countless prodigies had also walked this world. Judging from this, there should also be metal lightning, earth lightning, and fire lightning, Ling Han said. "I have a feeling that these 5 types of divine lightning can be fused together. At that time, using the 5 elements to cast lightning attacks will definitely result in astonishing destructive ability. This is a heavenly venerate technique," the Empress exclaimed. "It's similar to the 9 transformations divine scroll. That senior split the divine scroll into 9 scrolls, allowing even first heaven celestial kings to practice it. Meanwhile, this is a technique wherein lightning is contained within the 5 elements. It works in a similar manner to the 9 transformations divine scroll. The wisdom of our predecessors is truly eye-opening, Ling Han exclaimed in praise. The two of them stopped talking, instead focusing their full attention on absorbing the power of the lightning. This was not only the regulations of lightning, but also the regulations of water. Thus, absorbing the power of this lightning could elevate their comprehension of both water and lightning. After observing the seated and silent Ling Han and Empress for several days, the celestial kings were finally unable to contain their urge to return. What are they doing? Manipulating the lightning to enter their bodies? Are they seeking death? That stunning beauty! What a great shame! Heh, that celestial maiden doesn't even blink when she massacres people. Do you want to seek death? However, if they've truly died, then why isn't the lightning stopping? Gasp! Perhaps they haven't died? They're being attacked by such terrifying lightning, yet they're still not dead? Everyone found this to be inconceivable. However, after 1 day, 10 days, and 100 days, their feelings of shock and disbelief gradually transformed into numbness and acceptance. It was as if the bridge had always been so. They started to compete with the elder again, attempting to beat him and win the chance to cross the bridge. However, it was a pity that no one managed to succeed. 1 year, 10 years, 100 years. Time flew, and it was only natural that many newcomers arrived. Upon discovering the tumultuous river, they were naturally transfixed with shock. After learning that there were actually 2 people amid the lightning, however, all of them scoffed in doubt. Were these people taking them for fools? How could someone survive in such chaotic lightning? Moreover, for 100 years, no less. However, no one could beat the elder, so it was only natural that no one could approach the balls of lightning to observe them. It wasn't that no one had attempted to force their way across the bridge. However, these people had all been easily captured by the elder and tossed into the river. There, they were instantly blasted into smithereens by the magnificent power of the chaotic lightning. Only those with a battle prowess at the 7th heaven possessed the right to cross the river. 500 years, 1,000 years, 2,000 years. More and more people converged in front of the bridge. Finally, an elite also arrived. He was clearly at the 6th heaven, yet he possessed a battle prowess at the 7th heaven. With a single slash, he parted the lightning and calmly crossed the river. Gasp! Who is this person? He's only at the 6th heaven, yet he possesses a battle prowess at the 7th heaven. Is this a monarch star? Definitely. Otherwise, even monarch tiers at the peak stage of the 6th heaven can only possess a battle prowess at the 6th heaven. It's impossible for them to enter the territory of the 7th heaven. He's called Miao Yingwei, and he's a prodigy from Ice Origin City, someone said in a proud voice. Upon seeing the others look over, he chuckled and said, "This untalented person is called Shangji. I'm merely an insignificant follower of young Master Miao. Young Master Miao is destined to sweep through the entire world," he exclaimed with shining eyes. His face was filled with respect and reverence. Chapter 26-25 Miao Yingwei. Chapter 26-25 Miao Yingwei. Even though Changji's words were extremely exaggerated, none of the surrounding celestial kings could refute his claims. After all, Miao Yingwei's strength had been displayed for all of them to see. Once he unleashed his 7th heaven battle prowess, he could massacre all of them with ease. His battle prowess is nothing more than the 7th heaven, someone muttered quietly. The stunning beauty from before was only at the peak stage of the 4th heaven, yet she possessed a battle prowess at the peak stage of the 6th heaven. Someone beside them nodded, saying, "Even though that was thanks to her celestial tool, her strength alone was still at least at the 6th heaven. To surpass 2 cultivation levels. She's even more powerful than monarch stars." "Even more powerful than me?" Miao Yingwei asked. None of them had noticed that he had already split apart the lightning and returned at some time. The 2 people who had spoken hurriedly shut their mouths. Even though they were also at the 6th heaven, they knew that they were no match for Miao Yingwei. If conflict occurred, their only option would be to flee. Otherwise, they would definitely be killed. "Speak," Miao Yingwei said with a cold humph. Who can surpass me, Miao Yingwei? The two people didn't want to leave, thus they obediently told him about the Empress and her feats. She merely relied on her celestial tool, Miao Yingwei said in disdain. His voice became low, so low that only he could hear what he said as he muttered. To possess a celestial tool. Either she's a descendant of a ninth heaven celestial king from this place, or she's an outsider who's come here to train. His eyes were gleaming. Even though he was extremely talented, he didn't have the support of a heavenly venerate, so he naturally didn't possess a celestial tool. His eyes were red with lust. Regarding the Empress' beauty, however, he didn't believe this at all. Before entering the Celestial King graveyard, he had also been surrounded by countless beauties. What kind of stunning beauty hadn't he seen? The bumpkins in the Celestial King graveyard had seen far too few beauties, so even those who were slightly more attractive would be regarded as stunning beauties. He pointed to the bridge and asked, "You're telling me that those two people are inside the balls of lightning?" After receiving an affirmative answer, he replied with a shake of his head. Even with his strength, he still couldn't withstand the attacks of such lightning for too long. This was to say nothing of enduring it for several thousand years. These two people were definitely spreading rumors. How could measly fourth heaven celestial kings achieve such a feat? Let me have a look. He strode toward the bridge. You can't, someone shouted. If you attempt to cross the bridge without beating the elder in a game of Go first, you'll be tossed into the river and killed. Humph! Do I, Miao Yingwei, have anything to be afraid of? Miao Yingwei said as he strode forward. He didn't believe the nonsense of these people at all. He quickly arrived at the foot of the bridge. After hesitating for a brief moment, he ultimately decided to stride forward. Whoosh! There was a flash of lightning as the elder eerily appeared on the bridge. He then reached over to grab at Miao Yingwei. Do you think I'm afraid of you? Miao Yingwei said with a sneer. He replied with a palm strike of his own. Pun! The elder's hand swooped down, and Miao Yingwei's counterattack crumbled into a feeble heap. He was easily captured. And ninth heaven celestial king! He exclaimed through clenched teeth. The gulf between them was far too great. Facing such an elite, his only fate was being suppressed. The elder didn't speak at all. Instead, he simply swung his hand. Pa! Miao Yingwei was tossed into the river. Ah! A burst of brilliant light erupted around Miao Yingwei as he surprisingly dashed out of the river, hovering in midair. His eyes were filled with anger and resentment. He didn't die! This is unbelievable! As expected of a prodigy! He's far too powerful! Everyone exclaimed in astonishment. This was the first time they had seen someone survive after being tossed into the river. However, Miao Yingwei didn't appear proud at all. When he was tossed into the river, his cultivation had actually been sealed. Thus, his only option had been to await death. However, he possessed a rare treasure, one that he had obtained from an ancient site. This rare treasure would only activate when he came across a life-and-death situation, and it could only be used a single time. Just then, this rare treasure had unleashed its might. This signified that he had already died once. He had obtained nothing, yet he had wasted a life-saving treasure. How could he be happy? He sat down cross-legged next to the river. Right now, he was even more intent on obtaining the celestial tool. Otherwise, he would feel far too much regret. 100 years, 200 years. Finally, the lightning became weaker and weaker, revealing Ling Han and the Empress. As if sensing this, Miao Yingwei immediately opened his eyes. Upon glancing over, astonishment instantly swept over his face. Surprisingly, there were indeed two people inside the balls of lightning. Moreover, they were only at the fourth heaven and the fifth heaven. This was absolutely unfathomable. Chapter 26 Killed. Chapter 26 Killed. Miao Yingwei wore an expression of disdain as he said, I myself am invincible, so do I need to rely on my father or what not? His words were filled with pride and arrogance. Oh? Ling Han was slightly astonished. He genuinely hadn't come across someone as confident as Miao Yingwei in this place. This was unlike those second-generation young masters who harbored an inner sense of inferiority while being haughty. This was because they were nothing more than prisoners. Perhaps. Ling Han smiled and said, "You're an outsider who's come here to train, am I correct?" Miao Yingwei's expression involuntarily changed. Even though he was brimming with confidence, he only possessed a cultivation at the sixth heaven. At most, his battle prowess could only reach the peak stage of the seventh heaven. Thus, if faced with eighth heaven and ninth heaven celestial kings, his only fate would be death. If his identity as an outsider were exposed, he would definitely be hunted by everyone in the celestial king graveyard. At that time, his only option would be to hide in some unknown corner. "Utter nonsense!" he spat in a baleful voice. He lashed out again, not giving Ling Han the opportunity to speak. Ling Han laughed upon seeing this. He knew that he had guessed correctly. He casually counterattacked, easily blocking Miao Yingwei's attack. At this moment, would he still need to care about attacks at the seventh heaven? Miao Yingwei was relentless as he unleashed attack after attack. However, he became increasingly astounded. Ling Han was only replying with casual counterattacks, yet his defenses remained as sturdy as could be. He appeared extremely relaxed as he blocked his attacks. Miao Yingwei could only concede that this person was no weaker than him. However, how could such a freak appear in the Celestial King graveyard? A thought occurred to him, and he exclaimed, "So you're also an outsider!" The myriad worlds were brimming with countless prodigies. It was because of this that there could exist those who were more freakish than him. Ling Han replied with a faint smile. He then extended his right hand, grabbing at Miao Yingwei. He channeled the divine fluid raging lightning, treating Miao Yingwei as his training dummy. He would use him to familiarize himself with this secret technique. Miao Yingwei unleashed his full power. These arcs of lightning that were enveloped inside the regulations of water were far too terrifying. If he held back, he might truly be killed at any moment. It had to be said that even though Miao Yingwei's battle prowess wasn't too impressive, he was still a monarch star, after all, so there were things that Ling Han could learn. Ling Han suppressed his power, lowering himself to a level equivalent to his opponent. Rather than crushing his opponent, this could maximize the results of his training. As such, the battle between them instantly became intense and evenly matched. Ling Han attained comprehension after comprehension. He started to fuse the azure wood chaotic lightning and divine fluid raging lightning together. All 5 elements possessing lightning was the true power of this secret technique. Borrowing this monarch star as a training dummy, Ling Han rapidly deepened his understanding and comprehension of this secret technique. How could Miao Yingwei not realize this? However, Ling Han's attacks were like a tsunami that surged toward him wave after wave, not giving Miao Yingwei any time to rest. Otherwise, the latter would immediately be killed. Miao Yingwei felt as stifled as could be. As a mighty monarch star from the world's paramount martial academy, and as someone who had the talent to become a paramount heavenly venerate in the future, he was actually being treated as a training dummy? How could he not be enraged? However, had he not brought this upon himself? "Who in the world are you?" Miao Yingwei roared in rage. Countless prodigies had converged to the world's paramount martial academy, so it was naturally difficult to guess his opponent's identity. "You're only thinking of asking who I am now?" Ling Han said in a cold voice. This person was clearly lusting after the Empress, so Ling Han had already sentenced him to death. "As fellow disciples of the world's paramount martial academy, is there any need to take things so far?" Miao Yingwei said. For him to utter such words, it was clear that he had already admitted defeat. However, how could Ling Han stop now? He replied in a calm voice. "I'll suppress my cultivation to your level. If you can last 100 exchanges, I'll spare your life." "You're underestimating me," Miao Yingwei replied in rage. He conceded that he was indeed inferior to Ling Han. However, failing to last 100 exchanges against someone at the same battle prowess? Just what kind of joke was this? Ling Han replied with a faint smile. He unleashed a palm strike, with his might instantly increasing several folds. He had already fused the azure wood chaotic lightning and divine fluid raging lightning together, forming the lightning of water and wood. With 3 regulations fused together, just how terrifying would this be? Miao Yingwei was instantly suppressed. Regardless of how prodigious he was, how could he possibly rival the techniques of a heavenly venerate? To say nothing of Miao Yingwei, perhaps even the successors of heavenly venerates would be unable to rival this. Why was this? Perhaps there was no concept of ranking among heavenly venerate techniques. However, not all heavenly venerate techniques were suitable for celestial kings to practice. For example, even the imperial void celestial king, a domineering ninth heaven celestial king, found it difficult to use the sealed emotion heavenly venerable's dragonfish technique. That being the case, it would naturally be impossible for lower-level celestial kings to channel this technique. As such, even though the 9 transformations divine scroll and lightning of water and wood might not necessarily be top-notch heavenly venerable techniques, they were definitely supreme techniques among those at the celestial king tier. Miao Yingwei was extremely disheveled at this moment. Even with the same battle prowess, it was inevitable that he would fall into a disadvantage against the might of a heavenly venerate technique. Trying to suppress me within 100 exchanges? In your dreams! He shouted. Being at a disadvantage was one matter, and being defeated was another matter. He was confident that he could last 300 exchanges or even more. Is that so? Ling Han said with laughter. He started to channel the 9 transformations divine scroll. 2 heavenly venerate techniques. If he counted the indestructible heaven scroll as well, Ling Han now possessed a whopping 3 heavenly venerate techniques. Even though only the indestructible heaven scroll was complete, it was still a terrifying notion that a single person had grasped, and could channel, 3 heavenly venerate techniques. Miao Yingwei let out a muffled groan. With the 9 transformations divine scroll buffing Ling Han's attacks, it instantly elevated his battle prowess by 3 or 4-fold. This made him even more invincible. 100 exchanges would be extremely difficult to withstand. Miao Yingwei shed blood. With the help of 2 heavenly venerate techniques, Ling Han's battle prowess became far too terrifying. If this continued, he would die. He gritted his teeth before suddenly turning around to flee. Whoosh! Activating the regulations of space, Ling Han instantly appeared before him, blocking his path. Humph! You've already drawn on power that surpasses mine! Miao Yingwei chided. Otherwise, Ling Han couldn't have caught up to him. Ling Han smiled faintly and replied, The condition was that you wouldn't flee. His condition had been a fair battle between the 2 parties. However, since Miao Yingwei had broken this agreement, Ling Han naturally didn't need to limit himself anymore. As a fellow disciple of the Martial Academy, is there any need for you to back me into a corner like this? Miao Yingwei said, changing his tune. Begging for life with such indignity. Do you not feel embarrassed? Ling Han retorted with a cold chuckle. He didn't hold back anymore, with his hands like deadly axes as he unleashed attack after attack. With him channeling 2 heavenly venerate techniques in unison, his might was profound and unstoppable. Miao Yingwei defended with all his might, yet how could he possibly rival Ling Han? Even fleeing was impossible, so it wasn't long before he was mercilessly killed. Ling Han felt no pity. If someone crossed his bottom line, they could only suffer a single fate death. As he looked at the Empress, his gaze instantly became gentle. Right now, the Empress had already drawn her divine sword. She was extremely relaxed as she faced heavenly tribulation, and it was clear that he didn't need to worry at all. The celestial kings were all stunned. As it turned out, Ling Han and Miao Yingwei were both outsiders who had come here to train. Their gazes instantly became menacing. As prisoners, they wholeheartedly detested those who came here to train. It was only because Ling Han was far too powerful that they could only suppress this feeling. However, once Ling Han left, they would immediately expose his identity as an outsider who had come here to train. They would call upon countless elites to hunt down and kill this detestable person. One day later, heavenly tribulation dissipated, and the Empress descended from the sky. There were 5 ribbons of iridescent light around her slender body, and she radiated with a powerful aura. Let's go! Ling Han didn't pay any heed to the surrounding people. He was inching closer and closer to the sixth heaven, so he was unafraid even if his identity were truly exposed. Chapter 26-27 Hunted. Chapter 26-27 Hunted. Ling Han and the Empress became increasingly interested in the ancient tomb. There was a heavenly venerate technique hidden in this place, and this was more so one that they could practice straight away. Thus, this had great significance. They ventured deeper and deeper, and news of two people being outsiders who had come here to train also started to spread like wildfire. Outsiders! Several days later, Ling Han and the Empress came across people who were hunting them. This was a group of 3 seventh heaven celestial kings. Their expressions were baleful, and their eyes were filled with killing intent. They detested outsiders the most. These were people who treated them as stepping stones. Ling Han stood still, sweeping his gaze over them. He involuntarily smiled, and said, "Just you 3? That's nowhere near enough." "Impudence!" The 3 people roared as they attacked in unison. The Empress drew her sword. Swoosh! She was at the 5th heaven now, so combined with the might of her celestial tool, her battle prowess had already reached the peak stage of the 7th heaven. This slash was incredibly terrifying. The 3 seventh heaven celestial kings were deeply astonished, hurriedly spreading apart to dodge this attack. They then launched a counterattack of their own. Spiritual attack. 1. 3 bursts of devastating spiritual attack surged over, causing the Empress to involuntarily humph. An expression of pain spread across her delicate face. The gulf in cultivation level between them was far too great, so this kind of spiritual attack was extremely effective against her. Miao Yingwei hadn't unleashed this secret technique before, and this was because he had only just entered the ancient tomb. As such, he hadn't been affected by the black energy yet, so he hadn't been able to master this secret technique. However, these 3 people were different. They had entered the ancient tomb long ago, so not only had they been affected by the black energy for a long time, but they had even killed numerous celestial kings and absorbed their black energy as well. This caused their spiritual attacks to become even more destructive. "You're nothing but a measly 5th heaven celestial king!" The 3 celestial kings sneered. They pressed their advantage, aiming to defeat the Empress in a single breath. Their eyes were filled with greed and lust. This was because the Empress owned a celestial tool. However, the Empress remained unfazed as she continued to dance around, her sword stabbing and slashing like the falling rain. Borrowing the might of her celestial tool, her ferocity was such that the 3 seventh heaven celestial kings didn't dare to near her. Otherwise, if they got too close, they might be wounded by the celestial tool at any time. However, they simply needed to maintain a safe distance as they unleashed their spiritual attacks. This way, they could still suppress the Empress. Ling Han sighed, saying, 3 seventh heaven celestial kings attacking a 5th heaven celestial king. Have you people no shame? Brotherly, go and kill that brat. A 7th heaven celestial king in a purple robe said. Sure thing, the celestial king in black said with a nod. He turned around to charge at Ling Han. This man surnamedly refused to believe that Ling Han was also this freakish, being able to rival 7th heaven celestial kings while at the 5th heaven. Meanwhile, the celestial king in purple and the celestial king in green continued to attack the Empress. They believed that she was the stronger of the two, and thus she deserved the attention of 2 of them. Immediately surrender and hand over your celestial tool. That way, we can spare your life, the celestial king in purple said. His eyes were gleaming with greed. Not only did he want the celestial tool, but he also wanted to obtain this stunning beauty. The Empress didn't reply, instead continuing to brandish her sword. She couldn't be bothered responding to these foul insects. You too seem to have forgotten about me, Ling Han said in a slow and calm voice. What? That brat still isn't dead? The celestial king in purple and the celestial king in green looked over in unison. However, they instantly gasped, even stopping their attacks. The celestial king in black had already collapsed to the ground, a gaping hole in his chest. Blood flowed from this wound, and his life force had already been extinguished. If this were in the outside world, heaven and earth would grieve the death of a celestial king. Thus, it would be as obvious as could be. Here, however, the death of celestial kings would be accompanied by no such honor. Their lives were as worthless as cats and dogs. Gasp! This is far too quick, no? A seventh heaven celestial king being defeated by a fifth heaven celestial king was already unfathomable. To be killed in such a short amount of time was even more inconceivable. That was a seventh heaven celestial king! If he were intent on fleeing, even newly advanced ninth heaven celestial kings would be unable to stop him. Just what kind of trump card had this brat used? If not for one, they couldn't accept this at all. Come, which of you wants to be my next opponent? We'll fight one-on-one to ensure some fairness, Ling Han said with a faint smile. The celestial king in purple stepped forward, immediately unleashing a spiritual attack as he did so. Only then did he say, "I'll fight you!" 1. The spiritual attack arrived, and Ling Han couldn't help but frown. He felt like a needle had stabbed into his mind. This had happened numerous times already, yet there was still nothing that he could do about it. This kind of attack ignored distance, so it was almost impossible to defend. However, these attacks didn't affect Ling Han much either. He had already mastered the Divine Sense Scroll of the Indestructible Heavens Scroll, so this amount of pain couldn't affect him. His mind was boundless and flawless. It's disrespectful to receive but not give. Here, eat my punch! Ling Han said as he charged forward, throwing a punch at the Celestial King in purple. The Celestial King in purple humphed as he replied with a punch of his own. He was unafraid as long as Ling Han didn't use his trump card. In his mind, Ling Han had definitely used some kind of rare ninth heaven treasure to kill the Celestial King in black. Otherwise, how could a measly fifth heaven Celestial King possibly be so powerful? Pun! Their fists collided, instantly releasing a shock wave that spread into the surroundings. After faltering for a brief moment, the fist of the Celestial King in purple instantly shattered. A magnificent force continued to surge forth, causing his arm to also explode, and sending bits of shredded flesh into the sky and exposing his white bones. Pa 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 pa! Only when his entire arm exploded into pieces did the magnificent force finally subside. The entire right arm of the Celestial King in purple had already disappeared, with blood still spurting from his shoulder. The Celestial King in green was transfixed with terror upon seeing this. Fuck! This person had obliterated the arm of a seventh heaven Celestial King with a single punch. Just how devastating was his destructive ability? Why you? How can you possibly be so powerful? The Celestial King in purple stammered. He finally understood how the Celestial King in black had been killed so quickly. It wasn't that this person possessed a deadly weapon or whatnot. Instead, he was the deadly weapon. Cultivate earnestly in your next life, then you'll know, Ling Han said as he dashed forward and threw another punch. They were far too close, so it was impossible for the Celestial King in purple to dodge. He could only grit his teeth and throw a punch with his left hand. Pun! To no one's surprise, his left arm was also obliterated in an instant, turning him into an armless person. This wasn't a big deal for Celestial Kings. They all possessed flourishing vitality, so it was extremely easy to regrow broken limbs. The problem, however, was that the Celestial King in purple had no time to do so as Ling Han's third punch soared over. The Celestial King in purple raised his left leg to block. Pa! His left leg was also obliterated, transforming him into a one-legged person. He didn't dare to block any more attacks. Hopping on his single remaining leg, he immediately turned around to flee. Heavens! This fifth heaven Celestial King was far too terrifying. This wasn't someone he could kill. Ling Han shook his head, saying, "You still want to flee? It's already too late." If the Celestial King in purple had turned around to flee immediately after coming across Ling Han, it would have been extremely difficult for Ling Han to stop him even if he activated the regulations of space. Now that they were so close, however, it was truly a joke that the Celestial King in purple still thought that he could escape. Ling Han caught up to him in an instant, directly throwing a punch. Pooh! The celestial king in purple violently vomited blood as he stumbled forward. Slowly looking down, he saw that a gaping, bloody hole had already appeared in his chest, with his heart completely obliterated. He then looked up at Ling Han, disbelief in his eyes. As a mighty seventh heaven elite, he was actually killed just like this. With this thought in mind, he crashed heavily to the ground, throwing up a cloud of dust. Chapter 26-28 Inheritance of Flames. Chapter 26-28 Inheritance of Flames. The celestial king in green trembled in terror. Those were two seventh heaven celestial kings. Regardless of whether it was the celestial king graveyard or the flaming frost realm, these were still paramount and powerful beings. Yet, they had been completely powerless before Ling Han, killed as if they were mere ants. Ignoring the Empress, the man in green hurriedly turned around to flee. Humph! The Empress immediately activated her greatest eternity everlasting physique, affecting the flow of time. The speed of the celestial king in green instantly fell by a dramatic amount. Physique of time? The celestial king in green exclaimed in shock. He hurriedly shook his body and unleashed his full might, drawing on the power of seventh heaven regulations. His speed instantly returned to normal. This was the power of the great Tao, impossible to infiltrate by any power. However, the Empress had already seized this opportunity to catch up to him. She slashed down with her sword, her attack like a roar that reverberated through the heavens. "Move aside!" The celestial king in green bellowed as he hurriedly unleashed a spiritual attack. The Empress immediately faltered, and he seized this opportunity to flee. The celestial king promised himself that he would never cross paths with this man and woman ever again. They were far too fucking freakish. Whoosh! All he saw was a blur as a person suddenly materialized before him. Ling Han! Gasp! How is he so quick? The regulations of space. It's definitely the regulations of space. Otherwise, how can his speed possibly be so terrifying? He was deeply astounded. Regardless of whether one was hunting someone else or fleeing from someone else, it was always most frightening to come across someone who had mastered the regulations of space. "The fight isn't over, so why are you fleeing?" Ling Han asked in a calm voice. However, he didn't attack. The Empress caught up, and immediately slashed with her sword. The celestial king in green had no option but to block this attack. Otherwise, he would definitely be killed. If he fought, Ling Han would continue to spectate the battle. If he tried to flee, however, Ling Han would immediately dash over to block him. The celestial king in green also understood that it would be impossible to flee. With this in mind, he decided that he had to defeat and then capture the Empress. He could then use her to threaten Ling Han. Otherwise, he would definitely be killed here. After making this decision, he immediately abandoned all thoughts of escape. He unleashed his full strength as he battled against the Empress. Even though he was a weak celestial king, the fact that he had become a celestial king was already proof enough of his talent. He threw punch after punch, with his battle prowess being extremely chaotic and violent. If it weren't for her celestial tool, the Empress would actually be no match for this celestial king. After all, even though she was a supreme monarch star, there was still a gulf of two heavens between them. However, her celestial tool completely changed the situation, allowing her to gain the upper hand. The celestial king in green was completely suppressed, unable to threaten the Empress. After 300 or so exchanges, the Empress unleashed another slash. Pooh! The celestial king in green was immediately beheaded. Ling Han gazed into the distance, saying, "By the looks of it, our journey is going to become a difficult one." The three people had only been seventh heaven celestial kings. If the couple came across eighth heaven celestial kings, Ling Han would still be able to suppress them if they were only ordinary celestial kings. However, things would be much more difficult if they were monarch tiers. If they were monarch stars, then their strength would definitely surpass Ling Han's. Things would only be direr if they were supreme monarch stars. "There are still at least 3 lands of inheritance," the Empress said. Ling Han nodded in agreement. After learning the 2 lightning techniques, he became increasingly interested in obtaining the remaining 3 lightning techniques. Only by fusing them together could he truly unleash the might of the heavenly venerate technique. They advanced with courage, overcoming several ambushes from seventh heaven celestial kings. Right now, they were only being attacked by seventh heaven celestial kings. This was most likely because the others thought that seventh heaven celestial kings were powerful enough to suppress Ling Han and the Empress. However, after the pursuers were exterminated time and time again, the people in the Celestial King graveyard finally understood that seventh heaven celestial kings were unable to kill Ling Han and the Empress. Thereupon, eighth heaven celestial kings started to hunt the two. Meanwhile, Ling Han and the Empress arrived before a lofty mountain. This mountain was crimson, yet this wasn't because of its geology or its vegetation. Instead, this was because this mountain was an active volcano, with lava flowing down its sides and dyeing the entire mountain red. Arcs of crimson lightning flashed inside the lava, transforming into the shapes of all kinds of animals. There wasn't anyone blocked by this mountain, because it was possible to walk around it. However, Ling Han and the Empress didn't plan to walk around this mountain. They had already obtained 2 lightning secret techniques, so based on their analysis, it was extremely likely that a third was hidden here, the lightning of fire. Let's take a look. They entered the premises of the mountain. However, before they even neared the lava, they could already feel the waves of heat surging over, and turning their clothes charcoal black. The two of them naturally didn't want to wander around naked, so they immediately activated their source power, forming a shield of light around themselves. The circulation of regulations could repel the fearsome heat. However, this was only the beginning. The closer to the lava they got, the more terrifying the heat became. Eventually, they had no option but to walk in midair. They circled the lofty mountain once, yet they didn't make any discoveries. Perhaps this place doesn't contain any heavenly venerate technique? They couldn't help but converse, becoming skeptical of their initial analysis. Unless... The two of them exchanged a glance, saying, "The inheritance is inside the lava. I'll go and take a look," Ling Han said to the Empress. His physique was freakishly powerful, and his defensive abilities were also far superior to the Empress. The Empress nodded as she sat down cross-legged. Ling Han had initially wanted the Empress to enter the celestial guest residence, but he immediately abandoned this thought after seeing this. With the Empress' strength, and with the might of her celestial tool, she would be able to flee even if she came across an 8th heaven celestial king. Ling Han descended from the sky, and directly entered the lava. A heat 100 times more terrifying than before instantly enveloped him, disintegrating his shield in a flash. TSSS. His clothes caught fire before instantly disintegrating and turning into dust. However, this was the only option. Symbols appeared on his body, emitting a golden glow. He was actively channeling the indestructible heaven's scroll. With his current cultivation, even those with a battle prowess at the 9th heaven would need to attack him several times if they wanted to wound him. Moreover, following his rise in cultivation, he could also channel the indestructible heaven's scroll for longer and longer. He wandered around the sea of flames, with his eyes gleaming with brilliance. Even the surrounding lava was unable to suppress this brilliance. Ling Han scoured the surroundings inch by inch. This lava contained the powerful regulations of flames, affecting his vision and not allowing him to see too far. Thus, he could only observe his immediate surroundings, which greatly reduced his speed. After an hour, he flew out of the lava. Firstly, he couldn't push himself until he was completely unable to channel the indestructible heaven's scroll. Secondly, he needed to check in on the Empress. After all, they were the enemies of this entire realm. The Empress was peacefully seated, and after taking a single glance around, Ling Han also landed next to the Empress, recovering some of his source power. One day later, Ling Han entered the lava again. He had already recovered to his peak state. He could only explore a limited area each day, and he definitely couldn't leave before he finished exploring the entire mountain. 3 days, 5 days, 10 days. In the blink of an eye, 3 months had already passed. On this day, a smile quickly spread across Ling Han's face after he entered the lava. This was because he discovered that the ground here was different. There was a distinct vein, and it looked much like the meridian veins of a person. This vein appeared natural, as if it were merely a part of the mountain that had been formed in a slightly strange shape. However, Ling Han didn't think this. He saw what was hidden inside these veins. Indeed, this is the third land of inheritance, Ling Han said in his mind. He was slightly engrossed as he started to investigate this. If he failed to find the formation eye, he would eventually be assaulted by the boundless flames and lightning, something that even his physique wouldn't be able to withstand. Meanwhile, above the lava, 1. A terrifying aura descended, after which a celestial king walked over from the sky. His body was surrounded by 8 ribbons of iridescent light. The Empress was instantly awakened with a start. She opened her beautiful eyes and looked over at the celestial king. "You're the outsider who's come here to train?" the 8th heaven celestial king asked. Even with his disposition, when he swept his gaze across the Empress, his heart couldn't help but flutter. However, he immediately suppressed this feeling. The Empress didn't respond. It had only ever been she who asked the questions. How could the opposite be allowed? She immediately drew her sword, pointing it at the 8th heaven celestial king. Chapter 26-29 An 8th heaven celestial king moves. Chapter 26-29 An 8th heaven celestial king moves. A mere 5th heaven celestial king, quickly throw down your sword and surrender. That 8th heaven celestial king stood with his hands crossed behind his back, appearing very powerful and authoritative. He naturally had the right to do this. He was an 8th heaven celestial king, merely a single cultivation level away from the peak battle prowess of the celestial king graveyard. He naturally had the right to make demands, and could act domineering. The Empress couldn't be bothered to even respond. With celestial tool in hand, she wanted a battle. "I am Zhang Tianyan," that 8th heaven celestial king announced. "Seeing as how your natural talent is not too bad, I will give you a chance to survive. As long as you are willing to become my disciple, I can spare your life, and can teach you supreme techniques." He coveted the Empress's exquisite beauty. It was a lie that he was going to take her as a disciple. The truth was that he wanted to make her his mistress. The Empress shouted lightly, and took the initiative to attack. "You are biting off more than you can chew." Zhang Tianyan smirked coldly. He delivered a palm strike, and wing, a frightening pressure assailed. Regulations took solid form, pressing down on the Empress. Pun! The Empress was instantly sent flying. Though she was very strong, she could not compare to Ling Han, so how could she match an 8th heaven opponent when she herself was only in the 5th heaven? Thankfully, the celestial tool sliced apart the regulations, so she was not too heavily injured. "Where's that brat?" Zhang Tianyan's gaze wandered. He feared that Ling Han would flee directly when he saw Zhang Tianyan move. If that happened, Ling Han really might be able to escape. The Empress gave no answer. She grabbed out with her left hand, and boundless water vapor and lightning were drawn towards her. Meanwhile, grass sprouted on the ground, trying its best to grow. Zhang Tianyan looked slightly surprised. Regulations of water, wood, and lightning were rapidly being drawn and fused in the Empress's hands. Ordinarily speaking, a 5th heaven celestial king definitely could not possibly gather so many regulations. This had reached the 7th heaven celestial king tier. Interesting. Zhang Tianyan's eyes slightly lit up. This little girl has actually grasped a secret technique, and it seems very extraordinary. He was greatly moved. He could obtain both the beauty and a secret technique. He was really coming back with full rewards this time. In comparison, even if he did not capture that man from before, it did not seem all that important now. In any case, other celestial kings would still move. I'll have to see exactly how extraordinary this secret technique is, Zhang Tianyan thought to himself. As he thought this, the Empress had completely gathered the 3 kinds of regulations. Divine fluid raging lightning had fused with azure wood chaotic lightning, turning into lightning of water and wood. A greenish-black spear of lightning appeared, gripped in the Empress's hand. "This truly is very extraordinary. If I was the slightest bit careless, this attack could even rip through my defense," Zhang Tianyan mumbled, his eyes even brighter. The reason he had entered this place was so he could obtain the remaining 6 parts of the 9 transformations divine scroll, yet now he discovered that the secret technique the Empress possessed was not the slightest bit inferior to it. This was a great profit. Crack! The Empress moved, throwing the lightning spear, which shot rapidly towards Zhang Tianyan. Zhang Tianyan was proud of his own strength, and naturally would not even bother to dodge. He stretched out a hand and grabbed the lightning spear. Great Tao wrapped around his hand, and practically no technique could touch him. Pa! However, he clearly overestimated his own strength, and also underestimated the might of this heavenly venerate technique. Though he had got hold of the lightning spear, the lightning was still wreaking havoc, and still caused his right hand to explode, blood seeping from the wounds. This could only be considered minor injury, but the attack of a 5th Heaven Celestial King could actually make an 8th Heaven Celestial King bleed. By itself, this was an extremely rare event. Yet Zhang Tianyan was not furious, but rather delighted. The power of the lightning spear was too strong, but it also brought him a great pleasant surprise. If he could obtain this secret technique, then could he use this to intimidate 9th Heaven Celestial Kings? He laughed loudly, and he approached the Empress quickly with a flash. Since he had already witnessed the might of this secret technique, he had also lost his patience. Now he was going to capture the Empress, and gain both her and her secret technique for himself. It was true that the Empress was proud, but she was not stupid. Since an 8th Heaven Celestial King had unleashed his might, how could she possibly face him head-on? With a quick flash of her figure she dodged. "You want to escape from me? You are truly dreaming!" Zhang Tianyan laughed loudly. His large hand descended, and everything within 5 km of him had fallen under his control. Even regulations would have to submit to him. That was how domineering an 8th Heaven Celestial King could be. The Empress remained cold. The celestial tool in her hand slashed out, forcefully cutting out a path for herself. "And a celestial tool?" Zhang Tianyan was taken back, and then laughed loudly. He was really overjoyed by now. This was not just 2 birds with 1 stone, but 3. He could actually gain a celestial tool as well with this move. Was this a supreme opportunity that the heavens had bestowed on him? "Where are you running to?" He moved once more, drawing on the regulations of heaven and earth which turned into multiple pillars that surrounded the Empress. The Empress brandished the celestial tool to open a path for herself, while her left hand continued to use lightning of water and wood to deliver blasts at Zhang Tianyan, forcing him to slow down. Back and forth, Zhang Tianyan shockingly discovered that he actually was unable to do anything against the Empress. It was not that the Empress was heaven-defyingly powerful, but rather that the celestial tool she had in her hand could cut through anything and everything. Even the prison that he had formed from regulations was easily sliced through, and more importantly, he also had reservations in his offensive. He was not willing to harm the Empress. He wanted to capture for himself a complete, flawless beauty, and that was how the Empress managed to easily evade him every time. After several times, Zhang Tianyan had gradually lost his patience. In his eyes, the Empress was no longer a person, but rather a treasure chamber. He was determined to obtain her, and she was not to be shared with anyone else, either. If he had to injure her, so be it. In any case, as long as the core of a celestial king was not injured, any injury could be quickly recovered. With these thoughts, the intensity of his attacks increased countless times over, causing the Empress to be seemingly in a difficult situation. It could not be helped. The gap in cultivation level was too wide. The fact that the Empress could hold on until now was already very, very impressive. "If you do not want to suffer any longer, surrender quickly," Zhang Tianyan demanded coldly. For celestial kings like him, once they had steadied their resolve, their will definitely could not be shaken. No matter how pitiful the Empress looked, it was not enough to soften his heart. The Empress still stayed silent. What worth did this damn bug have to make her speak? "Stubborn!" Zhang Tianyan humphed, and slashed out his palms towards the Empress like they were 2 axes. Even if he was wary of the might of the celestial tool, and dared not approach too close, with the attack that was driven by the cultivation level of an 8th heaven celestial king, every palm strike would be heavy as a mountain, smashing forcefully through regulations, and also made it extremely difficult for the Empress herself to draw on any regulations. This was the strength of a high-level celestial king. With their superior cultivation level, they could directly empty out all regulations in the area, and lower-level celestial kings would not be able to draw on regulations. They would be forcefully suppressed to the severing mundane tier. The Empress could only use the celestial tool to attack him. It was not affected by Zhang Tianyan, and could destroy anything in this world. Just sit down obediently. Zhang Tianyan laughed loudly. He had already grasped the upper hand completely. Pressing down a single palm, he wanted to crumble all of the Empress's battle prowess. But when he lowered his palm, he discovered that he had actually become exceedingly slow. Regulations of time? He was surprised. Faced with his great power, the Empress should not have been able to draw on any kind of regulations at all, so where had these regulations of time come from then? Moreover, being able to use regulations of time when she herself was not yet 9th heaven, just how heaven-defying was the good luck of this pretty little girl? Xiao! The Empress took advantage of the opening to slice out of the siege and once again escape. She had used the greatest eternity everlasting physique. Her own physique naturally could not possibly be sealed by Zhang Tianyan. Otherwise, that would mean that she had already fallen into his hands. I don't believe this. How could it be that I can't capture a little 5th heaven celestial king like you? Zhang Tianyan was also truly angered now. He, a great 8th heaven celestial king, had moved, and actually had not been able to capture his prey after such a long time. Oh, is that right? Ling Han's cold voice rang out. Chapter 2630 Intense Battle. Chapter 2630 Intense Battle. Ling Han studied the veins in the lava for a while, and after he discovered he was close to his limits in maintaining the channeling of the indestructible heaven scroll, he flew out, and then witnessed how Zhang Tianyan was presently hunting down the Empress. This naturally filled him with extreme fury. He immediately flashed out, and attacked Zhang Tianyan. En? Zhang Tianyan was slightly startled. He had not thought that the brat would actually be hiding inside the lava. This lava pool was very frightening. The regulations of lightning and fire were flowing within, and even a 9th heaven celestial king would not deliberately run in. There were no benefits to be gained, so it would simply be a waste of their own power. What did you, a mere 5th heaven, run in there for? I will beat you till you burst! Without saying anything else, Ling Han directly charged over, his hands clenched into fists, with regulations wrapped around them. He burst out with his full power, having regulations wrapped around his fists, and activating his body art as well. He also had 2 heavenly venerate techniques which boundlessly boosted his battle prowess. This naturally made his attack incredibly violent. As he threw a punch, it was as if he was a true dragon in human form, exuding an incomparably formidable and terrifying aura. At first, Zhang Tianyan had considered Ling Han below his notice. The latter was only a mere 5th heaven celestial king, and did not have a celestial tool, either. What need was there for Zhang Tianyan to take Ling Han seriously? But when Ling Han attacked, Zhang Tianyan was immediately stunned. This battle prowess was strong enough to compare to the middle stage of the 8th heaven celestial king tier. This was really crazy. Without any external factors, a 5th heaven celestial king was actually capable of unleashing battle prowess of a middle stage of the 8th heaven celestial king. Was he going to defy the heavens? Going by that accounting, once this brat reached 6th heaven, wouldn't he then be able to stand at the pinnacle of the celestial king tier, and stand equal to a 9th heaven celestial king? This couple was really too extraordinary. No wonder they dared to train here. They probably had a heavenly venerate backing them, right? However, this was the celestial king graveyard. A heavenly venerate would definitely not set foot here. This was a common agreement that all the heavenly venerates had agreed upon. Even if Zhang Tianyan killed Ling Han, he would have nothing to fear. There would definitely be no heavenly venerate that would enter this place to hunt him down. Do you think I am afraid of you? Zhang Tianyan smirked coldly. He was a late-stage 8th Heaven Celestial King. Though it was only slightly stronger than Ling Han, that was already enough. He also charged towards Ling Han, his hands slashing downwards. He was like a true dragon, like a terrifying beast from the primitive age. Ling Han laughed loudly, meeting the attack with both fists ready. Pun! 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 The two great elites clashed. After the exchange of every single punch, shock waves would reverberate, and it was as if even the heavens would be collapsing at any moment. After exchanging over a dozen blows in a single stroke, Zhang Tianyan couldn't help but feel shocked. As expected, he indeed had the upper hand in terms of power, but Ling Han's physique was too frightening. Though the latter would be sent sliding backwards with every exchange, the vitality in his body was still burning brightly, without any sign of chaos at all. If this was another person, even if it was really a middle-stage 8th Heaven Celestial King, their vitality would definitely be stirred up in this kind of exchange, their battle prowess deteriorating. In fact, it was not impossible that they would even be directly sent flopping onto the ground from the impact. For Ling Han, who was clearly at a disadvantage, but still had no loss to his battle prowess, this was too inconceivable. How could there be someone like this? Ling Han seethed with fury, raining down punches. Damn old geezer, you actually dare hurt my wife! I am going to beat you into mush! Zhang Tianyan felt depressed. He had not wanted to hurt the Empress. He only wanted to capture her. Furthermore, a 5th Heaven Celestial King actually declared that he was going to beat him till he burst. How could he endure such humiliation? Brat, you are too arrogant! He was the first to change his tactic. With a shake of his right hand, a small golden tower appeared in his hand. The moment it appeared, it began spinning, and floated into the air above his head. The golden tower cascaded down precious qi. It could be seen that every streak of qi was extremely heavy, suppressing even regulations. This was not a celestial tool, but the materials used to forge it were also extraordinary. Furthermore, Zhang Tianyan had used his cultivation level of the 8th heaven to temper it constantly, so its might was truly no trivial thing. It could be claimed that not only was it not weaker than himself, it was even that slight bit stronger at that. Die! Against Ling Han, Zhang Tianyan did not have the slightest bit of reservations. Ling Han had been a target that he wanted to kill in the first place. He threw a punch, and as his power combined with the precious qi of the golden tower, the might was greatly magnified. Ling Han roared loudly, and still responded with a fist. Pun! This time, Ling Han was far from being a match for his opponent. He was sent flying with a single punch, and cracks rang out from all the bones of his body. If it were not for the fact that his physique was extremely strong, a great many of his bones would probably have broken from this one blow. You can't even withstand a single blow! Zhang Tianyan sneered. He was completely unconcerned that he had already drawn his precious tool, while Ling Han was still fighting with bare fists. A loss was a loss, and a victory was a victory. Anything else was just mere excuses. With a loud battle cry, he took the chance to follow up on his attack. Ling Han wiped the corner of his mouth. He knew that the gap in cultivation level was ultimately too wide. When he was using his bare fists, he would also only be able to match an 8th Heaven Celestial King that was unarmed. Once the latter drew his precious tool, and he was still in the same circumstances, his disadvantage would be too great. Old geezer, you are asking for your own suffering? Ling Han drew the divine demon's sword. Cold light flashed, and it was as if a 9th Heaven Celestial King had appeared, exuding a harsh air of dominance over all. After devouring an adequate amount of divine metal, even if the divine demon's sword had not reached the heavenly venerable tier, it still far surpassed the level of divine metal. At least it could already compare to a 9th Heaven Celestial King in terms of intimidation. And? Zhang Tianyan was stunned. This was yet another celestial tool. Fuck, how lavish. He was an 8th Heaven Celestial King, but he had only ever seen celestial tools himself even now, but this couple were only in the 5th heaven, yet both of them had a celestial tool in hand. In comparison, he, an 8th heaven celestial king, was really too poor. People who had come from outside were indeed different. They had a heavenly venerate backing them, and even celestial tools were things that they could easily gain. I will kill you! Ling Han wielded the sword and moved, slashing madly at Zhang Tianyan. You think you are capable? Zhang Tianyan almost died of fury. It should be known that he had come to kill these two outsiders who had come here to train. He drew on the precious qi of the golden tower, and threw a punch. The force of the attack turned into a golden battle wolf that pounced towards Ling Han. He was wary about the might of the celestial tool, and did not dare to battle in close quarters. Pooh! Ling Han's sword swept out, and that golden battle wolf was instantly slashed in half. Faced with the terrifying destructive power of the divine demon sword, it was impossible that the golden battle wolf would have any chance to attack again. It was directly destroyed. Zhang Tianyan was astounded. It was not that he had never exchanged blows with a celestial tool before, but while the celestial tool in the Empress's hands was still powerful, it had not had might like this. Ling Han attacked aggressively. With a wave of his left hand, the lightning of water and wood was unleashed, turning into a spear of lightning that was smashed towards Zhang Tianyan. Ling Han had long since channeled the 9 transformations divine scroll. Though it had not reached the greatest boosting effect, with 3 parts fused into one, this might was already considerably great. The lightning spear shot out fiercely, and the divine sword danced. He had completely taken the initiative in this battle. Zhang Tianyan was helpless. His world-shaking strength was useless here as he did not dare to fight a power battle against Ling Han. Even if he was an 8th heaven celestial king, definitely nothing good would happen if he tried a power battle with a celestial tool. Just think, a great 8th heaven celestial king was actually being suppressed by a 5th heaven celestial king. This was very inconceivable, yet it was truly and genuinely playing out now. Damn it! Damn it! Zhang Tianyan cursed. He had completely not foreseen this before he made his move. This couple's strength was really too great, especially in the case of Ling Han. He was so strong that it went beyond logic. You actually dare to use a tower-shaped precious tool. That is even more of a reason that I cannot spare you. Ling Han's eyes swept over the golden tower above Zhang Tianyan's head, his killing intent blazing even hotter. Though the Black Tower had already been snatched by Heavenborn, Ling Han was still heavily influenced by it. What he hated the most were tower-shaped precious tools. Zhang Tianyan felt like he didn't know what to say here. Fuck, have I caused you any trouble just by forging my precious tool in the shape of a tower? Chapter 2631 The greater the wounds, the stronger he becomes. Chapter 2631 The greater the wounds, the stronger he becomes. I'll beat you up! Ling Han's right hand wielded his sword, but his left hand changed gestures frequently. At times it would be a palm strike, at times he would clench his hand into a fist, and sometimes he would send out a spear of lightning with a wave. Change was only a matter of thought for him. He had already walked out his own path. His cultivation was no longer limited by form, but would change as he willed it. Yet Zhang Tianyan felt horrible. Ling Han's attacks seemed completely chaotic and disorganized, yet were extraordinarily powerful. It looked like Zhang Tianyan had the upper hand in power, but when they actually fought, he fell into a disadvantage, which was something he couldn't understand. However, he was still an 8th heaven celestial king, after all. Looking at how Ling Han's calm face was enshrouded in precious qi, as if a god was about to walk out of him, he couldn't help but exclaim, "You have walked out your own path." He knew very well that if one wanted to become a heavenly venerate, the most basic, as well as the most important step, was to walk out one's own path. Every single heavenly venerate was unique and special. Even if Lin Luo had 3 heavenly venerate disciples, they had all taken that last step on their own. Their master only helped to guide them, but could not make it so that their descendants would follow in their footsteps every bit of the way. In this instant, Zhang Tianyan was extremely jealous. Though walking out one's own path did not mean that one would definitely become a heavenly venerate, if the most crucial step had already been taken, the largest barrier for breaking through to the heavenly venerable tier was already swept out of the way. This kind of person actually came into the Celestial King graveyard? You are courting your own death, Zhang Tianyan declared coldly. His jealousy was ignited, making him want nothing more than to immediately kill Ling Han. You coming here is just an act of suicide, and you even wounded my wife. Even tearing you into pieces is not enough to vent my fury, Ling Han shouted loudly. He drew his sword, boundless light illuminating the surroundings. He was keeping nothing back anymore, unleashing his battle prowess to the maximum limits. Zhang Tianyan did not believe that Ling Han could maintain his battle prowess at this height constantly, or that would be too illogical. Hence, he did not take even half a step back, his every move being a forceful clash with Ling Han. He wanted to blast Ling Han out of this state as soon as possible. By then, he would get Ling Han's head, and then capture the Empress. His rewards would be astonishing. Great opportunities naturally came with great danger. Now, the greatest opportunity was laid out right in front of Zhang Tianyan, so wasn't it very normal that there would be danger as well? Wang, he used his trump card. Spiritual attack. This was too despicable. Even if Ling Han had long since prepared himself, it was useless. He felt a pain in his head, and he had already been hit by the spiritual attack. I have to admit that you are indeed very strong, and also incomparably freakish, but you are too naive, after all. The fact that your cultivation level is too low is a weakness that you cannot change. Zhang Tianyan took the chance to charge over. With how bountiful his battle experience was, he would attack madly once he got the slightest opportunity, and kill his opponent in a single stroke. Ling Han smirked, and suddenly sliced out with his sword. What? Zhang Tianyan paled in great shock. As he thought about it, even if Ling Han's spirit was not wounded upon being affected by his spiritual attack, Ling Han would be frozen for about half a breath's time at least. This was enough time for Zhang Tianyan to annihilate his opponent. This strike was far beyond his expectations. He wanted to dodge this strike hurriedly with a tap of his foot, but it was already too late. Pooh! Blood sprayed out. Zhang Tianyan rapidly retreated 300 meters. He looked at the empty place where his left arm should be. It had been severed from the shoulder down, and there was blood gushing out. Good! 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 He forced out through clenched teeth. He had not thought that he, the hunter, would actually fall into the trap of his prey, and be deceived by his own experience. I said I would kill you! Ling Han leaped out, delivering another strike with his sword. He was indeed still affected by the spiritual attack, but it could only cause him a slight sting now. It was like how his physical body would hurt after being cut, but he was absolutely capable of tolerating this pain with strong willpower. Zhang Tianyan released another spiritual attack, while his hands balled into fists, and delivered countless blows as well. Ling Han felt a storm raging in his mind. It was incredibly painful to sustain spiritual attacks, but the more that was the case, the wilder his fighting spirit would be. He slashed madly at Zhang Tianyan as he pursued the latter, determined to kill his opponent. Yet Zhang Tianyan did not have such a strong fighting spirit. While he could cause considerable damage to Ling Han with the spiritual attack, Ling Han was also coming close to him. Even if the divine demon sword did not strike Zhang Tianyan directly, the sharp sword she was still enough to cause him great trouble. More importantly, Zhang Tianyan's left arm had already been directly severed by the divine demon sword. Endless murderous aura had also surged into his body through this injury, and was now wreaking havoc with wild abandon. How could the might of a celestial tool be underestimated? What more when the divine demon sword far surpassed an ordinary celestial tool in power? It was true that Zhang Tianyan was an eighth heaven celestial king, but it was still impossible for him to bear the destructive power of the divine demon sword. If Zhang Tianyan had the time to sit down and recover from his injuries, he would still be able to expel the murderous aura of the divine demon sword from his body bit by bit. But with Ling Han detaining him now, how could he possibly have the time? This was using his own injuries to trade for injuries on his opponent. Ling Han threw his mind on the line, letting it come under continuous attacks. Blood was already flowing out of all his apertures, but his own assault did not stop. His fighting spirit overwhelmed the heavens, and also caused massive trouble for Zhang Tianyan. Sword Qi danced wildly, causing Zhang Tianyan to be heavily injured as well. Their injuries were different, but their severity was more or less the same. It would have to depend on who would be the first to fall. Zhang Tianyan soon revealed his intent to retreat. He feared that even if he did kill Ling Han, his own injuries would be too heavy, and he would die right alongside Ling Han. Zhang Tianyan was greedy, but as someone who had reached the height of 8th heaven, he naturally could control his own greed. Gritting his teeth, he turned and fled. There was absolutely no way he alone could take Ling Han down, what more when the Empress's battle prowess was not to be underestimated as well. Zhang Tianyan would leave, and find someone to help him. Then, he would return to suppress these two people. In any case, there were two celestial tools, which was enough to share. Have I allowed you to leave? How could Ling Han possibly allow Zhang Tianyan to flee? Regulations of space were unleashed, and space instantly manifested into layers, as if it was a swamp. If I want to leave, how will you stop me? Zhang Tianyan laughed madly. If an 8th heaven celestial king was determined to flee, it would be very difficult for even a 9th heaven celestial king to stop him, what more when it was just a mere 5th heaven celestial king that was chasing him. Not only will I stop you, I will kill you! Ling Han used regulations of space on himself, traversing the layers of space, and setting off in hot pursuit of Zhang Tianyan. Zhang Tianyan used regulations to boost himself. He stood at the height of 8th heaven. Merely in terms of regulations, he would naturally overwhelm Ling Han. Pun! 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 Zhang Tianyan aggressively barged through the spatial barrier, his speed practically unaffected. But practically did not mean completely. Ling Han's speed was already astonishing in the first place. Once Zhang Tianyan was only slightly delayed, Ling Han immediately caught up with him, and swept out with the indestructible divine demon sword. Damn it! Zhang Tianyan had no choice. He could only turn around, and continue exchanging blows with Ling Han. It was still trading injury for injury. The injuries of the two of them also became more and more serious. One was injured from the inside out, and the other was injured from the outside in. Now that things had reached this point, it was actually a contest of willpower now. Whoever had the stronger willpower would be the last one standing. Pun! A punch landed on Ling Han, and Zhang Tianyan was also blasted by the lightning of water and wood. Both of them were throwing up blood endlessly. However, in the next instant, the two of them began a new exchange of blows. Pun! 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 The two of them bled endlessly, their injuries becoming gradually heavier. Zhang Tianyan discovered that his fighting spirit was becoming weaker and weaker, but on the other side, not only did Ling Han's battle prowess not weaken in the slightest, it was even increasing. This caused great shock to Zhang Tianyan. This kind of guy that would become stronger as his injuries became heavier was really too hard to deal with, especially in a situation when they were equally matched. The more you fought, the weaker you became, but your opponent would become stronger as the battle progressed. It was like cheating. How could you continue fighting then? I said I would kill you! Ling Han's fighting spirit soared directly into the clouds. His martial intent surged, and could not be stopped. Chapter 2632 3 Lightning Technique. Chapter 2632 3 Lightning Technique. After fighting intensely for 3 days, Zhang Tianyan died. He had died a very meaningless death. Even if he had encountered the strongest 8th heaven celestial king, and had been outmatched, he would have been able to leave calmly. However, faced with Ling Han, he did not even have the chance to escape. He was forced to trade injury for injury, to the point that he died. Ling Han also flopped onto the ground. His injuries in this battle were also very heavy. Previously, he had been battling on a single breath, and now that Zhang Tianyan was dead, he could not hold himself up any longer, either. The Empress hurriedly delivered Ling Han into the celestial guest's residence. It was augmented with the heaven-deceiving technique, and even if it was a 9th heaven celestial king that was carefully searching for it, he wouldn't necessarily discover its presence. Furthermore, even if it was discovered, it was forged from divine metal. Breaking into the celestial guest's residence was not an easy task. Ling Han recuperated from his injuries calmly. He had a premonition that he had profited greatly from this great battle. After his injuries were recovered, whether it was battle prowess or cultivation level, they would both increase to a greater level. Time passed day after day, and new Eighth Heaven celestial kings arrived. They discovered the signs of battle that were left behind, but they did not discover the presence of the celestial guest's residence. They came and left soon after. A whole 3 years later, Ling Han had finally recovered from his injuries completely. Not bad, I am close to reaching the late stage of the fifth heaven. This kind of battle that forces out my potential completely is indeed the fastest method to improve my cultivation level. Ling Han murmured. Wife, let's go. We should go and retrieve the third mystical power, Ling Han said to the Empress. The Empress nodded. The both of them stepped out of the celestial guest residence. As for bewitching Maiden Ro, she continued to stay inside. There was no way for her to enter into the lava. Tong! The couple leaped into the lava. They had both spread out a protective layer of source power. If it was an extremely short amount of time, the source power shield would still be able to hold up. They arrived at the spot where ley lines converged, and studied it carefully. The Empress's defense was inferior to Ling Han's, and she had to come out of the lava once in a short while. Only when she recovered to her prime condition would she enter once more. Ling Han also shared his gains with the Empress. In this way, after about 3 years, they had finally confirmed all the details of the ley lines, and found the formation eye that was hidden within. Down! They dived further, but they had no plans on leaving immediately this time. They sat down where the formation eye was, and began to guide the power of the whole volcano so it would surge into their bodies. Boom! Fire and lightning wove together, surging madly towards them. However, this time, this power did not hurt them. Instead, it circulated inside their bodies, turning into their own power. Crimson flame windy lightning! They had obtained the third secret technique. Extremely bright seals of great Tao flashed in their mind. Boom! The whole volcano was erupting. Lava gushed out, and crimson lightning dazzled the eyes. Some passed by, and discovered the unusual phenomena. However, they thought that this was a natural event. No matter how hard they thought, they could never have imagined that there were two people that were hiding here. Close to another 3,000 years passed like that. The lava of the volcano was no longer flowing. The lightning had also stopped because the power of regulation inside had already been exhausted. The crimson lava had coagulated and solidified, becoming red rocks, but they were still giving off steam. Pung! The rocks broke apart, and 2 human figures rushed out of them at practically the same time. It was Ling Han and the Empress. Ha! Ling Han turned and flopped onto the ground. He stretched out his right hand. Boom! Green, red, and black light blazed at the same time before fusing. Then, a streak of lightning intertwined, turning into a small sword, and then took the form of a saber, spear, and so on. Change happened as he willed it. Not only had Ling Han grasped the crimson flame windy lightning, he had fused the 3 secret techniques together, and their might was even stronger now. Before I obtain all the lightning of the 5 elements, this will be called the 3 lightning technique. I have already advanced to the middle stage of the 5th heaven. The Empress smiled. For celestial kings like them, there was nothing more pleasing than an increase in their cultivation level. Ling Han nodded. I am also just a step away from the peak stage. He was overjoyed as well. Once he advanced into the 6th heaven, he would be able to match a 9th heaven celestial king. That last battle against Zhang Tianyan was already so difficult, and this man only had the aptitude of an emperor tier. If it had been a monarch tier, even if I had had the aid of the divine demon sword, I still might not have been able to kill him. Previously, I had been too self-satisfied. However, even if I encounter a peak stage 8th heaven celestial king now, there is nothing for me to be afraid of. I am still short of 2 types of secret techniques. Both Ling Han and the Empress were filled with anticipation. After fusing the 3 secret techniques, they were even more aware of how strong this heavenly venerate technique was, and wanted even more to grasp the remaining 2 secret techniques to form the most complete, flawless heavenly venerate technique. The 2 of them advanced hand in hand. Though there was great danger within this ancient tomb, they were already unafraid. Their battle prowess was close to reaching the 9th heaven, so they indeed had that kind of confidence. Several days later, they arrived in front of a small lake. From afar, before they had even come close, they could already smell a refreshing fragrance. Celestial medicine. The 2 of them exchanged a look, and exclaimed at the same time. However, it was not just they who had discovered that there was a celestial medicine here. The lake was surrounded by people who were 6th heaven celestial kings, at least, as they shone with streaks of peculiar light around them. Come, let's go and take a look. They strode forwards. Mere 5th heaven celestial kings actually dared to come here? A celestial king discovered the 2 of them, and involuntarily smirked coldly, looking extremely disdainful. However, the gaze he directed at the Empress was filled with a bit of heat. Do not underestimate them. It is impossible for ordinary 5th heaven celestial kings to come here. Their battle prowess has to reach the 6th heaven at least. Someone beside him remarked. In other words, monarch stars. The person from before immediately became serious. There were pitifully few monarch tears, and monarch stars were even rarer. Even in the flaming frost realm that had gathered the prodigies of countless dimensions, there was definitely still a limited number of monarch stars. This kind of prodigy would be qualified to become a heavenly venerate. Thus, unless they had committed an act that was wicked beyond redemption, it was impossible that they would be imprisoned in the Celestial King graveyard. Their number really could be counted on the fingers of 2 hands. If one is not a ferocious dragon, better not cross the river one. We had best not stand out, everyone said. No one was willing to be the first to become an idiot to challenge Ling Han and the Empress. What if their strength was heaven-defyingly powerful? Ling Han and the Empress soared, standing in midair. In this way, their vision would not be obstructed. They could clearly see that there was a green duckweed growing in the center of the lake. Its leaves were as large as basins, and it had borne a pale golden fruit at this time. The fruit's fragrance wafted, spreading throughout the nearest 500 kilometers. This is greenish-black flowing ripple fruit. Ling Han looked stunned. Judging by how the fruit looks, it is already close to ripening. That could possibly happen any time in the next few years. The Empress looked towards him, and he nodded. It is celestial medicine of the highest grade. You and I can share it between us, and it would be enough to push us both to the 6th heaven. Then we must pluck it, the Empress said. A celestial king dressed in green couldn't help but say, "Haha, I say, the 2 of you are really speaking such big words." He looked to be an old man in his 60s, his skin tightly wrinkled. He did not look like a 6th heaven celestial king at all. Do the 2 of you know just how many elites are fighting over this celestial fruit? Lord Fujiming, Lord Zhui Yuan, Lord He, and Yi. Ling Han was taken aback. He? Wasn't that Gu He then? They were here? Haha, this was really traveling far and wide to look for you, only to find you easily. Where is he? Ling Han asked. Naturally, he will only appear once the celestial fruit has ripened. By then, all the lords would begin a battle of the strongest, and only the victor will obtain the celestial fruit. That celestial king in green replied. As for us, we can only absorb some of the fragrance of the celestial fruit at that time, and who knows, there may be a chance that it would loosen the barrier to our cultivation levels. As for other delusions, there is no need to even think about it. Chapter 2633 Pei Shenghai. Chapter 2633 Pei Shenghai. Ling Han did not say anything else. Gu He would not be appearing for the moment, so Ling Han would just have to wait. Once the celestial fruit ripened, Gu He would definitely appear, and it would be fine to kill him then. Ling Han and the Empress sat down on the banks of the lake, absorbing the fruity fragrance. There was a sliver of energy from the heaven and earth contained within. It was extremely beneficial even for celestial kings. No wonder a great many people were still seated around here even when they had full knowledge that they were not qualified to contend for the celestial fruit. The majority of celestial kings were affected by the black chi, all of them having hot tempers, and would fight over the slightest issue. Battles happened practically every day. Some battles would only cause severe injuries, while some would only end when one side died completely. The strongest people here were 23 peak stage 7th heaven celestial kings. They all had the aptitude of monarch tiers, and had battle prowess close to the 8th heaven celestial king tier. Thus, they had always been domineering, and held no reservations in their actions. At present, Ling Han only had two matters on his mind. The first was to wait for Gu He to appear, and the second was to pluck the celestial fruit. He was unconcerned about all else. Hence, he did not cause trouble, and merely waited patiently beside the Empress. However, while they would not cause trouble, it did not mean that others would not trifle with them, either, especially when the two of them were both only 5th heaven celestial kings, and the Empress was extraordinarily beautiful. This was practically a treasure that was completely unguarded. It was too tempting to others. After Ling Han showed his might and killed 9 6th heaven celestial kings in a row, finally no one dared to trifle with them any longer. This brat seems quite extraordinary. Ling Han's performance also drew the attention of those peak stage 7th heaven monarch tiers as they all turned their eyes on him. Little Seven, go, have that brat come to greet me, a peak stage 7th heaven monarch tier declared. Understood. Ling Han sat with his head slightly raised, looking towards the celestial king that was approaching them. After he established his authority, no one dared to approach within 30 meters of him by now, yet this celestial king was just boldly walking towards the couple. Was he asking for a beating? Sir, my lord summons you, the celestial king said. He was a 6th heaven celestial king. Ling Han was nonchalant, and instead asked, Who is your lord? Pei Shenghai, Lord Pei, that 6th heaven celestial king declared proudly. Pei Shenghai was a monarch tier whose battle prowess was close to the 8th heaven celestial king tier. Even in this place, he could be ranked among elites. Ling Han shook his head. I don't know this random person. You! That 6th heaven celestial king was instantly outraged. Ling Han actually dared say that Pei Shenghai was just some random person. The 6th heaven celestial king forcefully suppressed his anger, and said, If Lord Pei is just some random person, what are you then? Ling Han's eyes flashed with coldness. He was just sitting here, what trouble had he caused? Yet not only did the other party come uninvited, he was actually saying such big words. From the very moment he opened his mouth, it was a demand that Ling Han go to greet someone. What right did he have to expect a pleasant reception from Ling Han? You are seeking death, Ling Han said coldly. Raising his hand, he pressed down on the opponent. You dare! That 6th heaven celestial king called out harshly, yet did not dare to even counter. He hurriedly broke into a run and fled. He had seen Ling Han fight before. Ling Han's battle prowess was too frightening. How could he possibly dare to face him head-on? But if he had managed to flee, would Ling Han have been able to kill an 8th heaven celestial king? Pung! The palm strike descended, and that 6th heaven celestial king was smacked into a bloody mush. When the people around saw this, they all inhaled sharply. This guy was really too harsh, killing at the slightest provocation. The other guy had just asked him to pay his greetings to Pei Shenghai. Who was Pei Shenghai? A peak stage 7th heaven monarch tier, who definitely was qualified to put on such airs. You actually killed his subordinate at the slightest disagreement. This is a deep offense to Pei Shenghai. As they saw it, Ling Han was dead. Previously, the reason why he could be so arrogant and domineering was because those 7th heaven celestial kings had not made a move on him. What more peak stage 7th heaven monarch tiers? Furthermore, Pei Shenghai is a close follower of Lord He. Someone revealed an even greater piece of information. What, Lord He? Everyone was trembling. Though he was also a 7th heaven celestial king, his battle prowess could be comparable to peak stage 8th heaven. Otherwise, he would not be qualified to contend for the celestial fruit. No wonder. So Pei Shenghai is one of the guards that Lord He has left here to watch over the celestial fruit. Lord He is really too extraordinary. He himself is only a seventh heaven celestial king as well, yet can make a seventh heaven celestial king monarch follow him willingly. In the future, he will definitely be able to reign over a city, and become an overlord in his own right. Even I wish to follow Lord He and ride on his coattails, but he doesn't even bother himself with me at all. Amidst a round of discussions, Pei Shenghai slowly stood, and then strode over to Ling Han, his expression icy cold. A puny fifth heaven celestial king actually dared not to give him face? Humph! He was not walking very fast, but with each step, a frightening aura reverberated like a sharp sword pointed straight at Ling Han. Ling Han actually dared to kill his subordinate right in front of him, and in full public. Pei Shenghai was naturally enraged. He swore that he would definitely make Ling Han feel extreme regret for his insolence. How dare you! You actually dare to kill my subordinate! Pei Shenghai exclaimed coldly, his voice rumbling out like thunder, and causing the ears of the people around them to ring. Only an absolute blank left in their minds. This caused everyone great shock. This was the strength of a peak stage 7th heaven monarch tier. It was truly strength that could not be imagined. Ling Han was calm and indifferent, and replied, Your subordinate provoked me, so I killed him. If you wish to follow in his footsteps, you can just come over then. I am not the type to like causing trouble, but if anyone causes trouble for me, just wait, and you will be crying soon. How dare you! Pei Shenghai shouted furiously. His voice turned into a wave that swept towards Ling Han like a tsunami. Xiao! Ling Han's figure flashed and pierced apart the sound wave like a sharp sword, rushing towards Pei Shenghai. You indeed have some strength. No wonder you dare to be so arrogant. Pei Shenghai smirked coldly. He raised a hand and pressed it down on Ling Han. But in front of me, this is far from enough. Ling Han suddenly sped up. Pun! Even a celestial king could not glimpse his movements. Everyone could only see a blur in their vision, and Ling Han had already appeared in front of Pei Shenghai. He raised his right fist, and suddenly smashed it downwards. En? Pei Shenghai humphed lightly, stunned by how fast Ling Han was. However, he did not panic. Impressive speed did not mean that his battle prowess would also be strong. Pun! Ling Han's fist crashed down. Pei Shenghai raised his arm to parry. Great Tao entwined around his arm, as if there was a layer of divine light from an indestructible guardian deity protecting him. He was extremely confident in himself. Even an ordinary 8th heaven celestial king could not destroy his defense with a single strike, what more when it was only a puny 5th heaven celestial king. Pa! The fist landed, and that layer of divine light was practically like it didn't exist as it immediately shattered, and before Pei Shenghai's expression even changed, the power of the punch exploded, and his right arm was instantly broken. Flesh split apart, bones broke, and blood sprayed out. And this was not all of it. An unstoppable force surged out, and Pei Shenghai collapsed onto the ground. Pun! It created a loud boom as his whole person sank into the ground. This attack was earth-shattering. A 5th heaven celestial king actually defeated a peak stage 7th heaven monarch tier? This is too unbelievable. How could there be a monster like this? They are a couple, and have such incredible power. Could it be? They are the outsiders who have come here to train? Everyone looked towards Ling Han and the Empress. There was shock in their expressions, as well as fear, but more than that, there was abhorrence. Ling Han was unconcerned, and merely seemed slightly surprised. You are actually still alive? Chapter 2634 Giving No Face. Chapter 2634 Giving No Face. Pun! A figure shot out of the ground, standing proudly in midair. A blood-red aura was bubbling from all over his body, as if he was a great demonic god that was about to begin a massacre, and kill every single being in this world. It was Pei Shenghai. Ling Han seemed slightly surprised. With a blow from him, A peak stage 7th heaven king too, even if he was a monarch actually hadn't been killed? I have really underestimated you. Pei Shenghai's voice rumbled out like thunder. Cold light shot from his eyes. Seals of great Tao were visibly flickering. His killing intent blazed as his fury reached extreme levels. That's what I thought. How could Pei Shenghai possibly be insta-killed? When the people in the area saw this, they all nodded. This was the kind of supreme monarch that they had imagined. Pei Shenghai must have been underestimating his opponent too much. His strength is definitely not as low as this. Meanwhile, Ling Han stared at Pei Shenghai for a while, and gave in. Oh, he said. The body defense technique you cultivate is indeed extraordinary, allowing you to escape this calamity. When one had reached a height that Ling Han had, he naturally knew very well how much force he needed to use in his attacks. He would definitely not waste the slightest excess bit, but he had not expected that Pei Shenghai would have cultivated a very strong body defense technique, and that was why he had not succeeded fully. Pooh! As if in response, Pei Shenghai immediately spat out a mouthful of blood. He had luckily escaped death, but it did not mean that he did not need to sacrifice anything for it. Seeing this scene, the people in the area were instantly extremely shocked. Correct. Ling Han had not killed Pei Shenghai with a single blow, but a single blow was enough to make the other party throw up blood. Was this not enough to express how strong he was? Heavens, his battle prowess would have to be at the 8th heaven at least, right? Even if it is the early stage of the 8th heaven, he has breached the gap of 3 cultivation levels. A 5th heaven, yet he possesses the battle prowess of the 8th heaven. I'm about to go crazy. Everyone was grabbing their head as they exclaimed in shock. They could not believe this. They knew that there were indeed freaks in this world, but this was really too freakish to a point that they could not accept. Pei Shenghai threw up blood like mad, but his vitality was actually soaring. His eyes shone with divine light, his fighting spirit blazing as he pointed a finger at Ling Han. You have successfully angered me, and death is the only path for you now. Ling Han laughed. Have you come to amuse me? Die! Pei Shenghai charged out. This time, he was no longer careless, a silver spear appearing in his hands. Shwa! His speed was astonishing, and in a flash of silvery light, he instantly rushed right in front of Ling Han in the next moment. In this blow, Pei Shenghai had brought with him the great power of the heaven and earth. It was as if the heaven and earth were working together to suppress Ling Han. Monarchs were monarchs after all, so how could his strength be underestimated? And just when the silver spear was about to pierce its target, a spiritual attack was sent out towards Ling Han as well. 1. Ling Han suddenly felt pain in his mind, as if his head was about to explode. Death Spear! Pei Shenghai roared out, pouring all his power into the spear, and stabbing out at Ling Han. Under the spiritual attack, even if Ling Han's mind did not explode, he would definitely still be affected, which would cause his reaction speed to slow down. And in a battle of this level, a slight delay of one's reaction would become fatal. Die! Pei Shenghai smirked coldly. His eyes were weeping tears of blood, and his expression was extremely twisted. But in the next instant, the smile on his face suddenly turned into shock. That was because Ling Han moved calmly, and easily grabbed this spear. It really was just a short distance away, and the tip of the spear halted at Ling Han's throat. Pei Shenghai pushed forwards with all his might, but the spear seemed like it was rooted, and was completely motionless. How could this be? You clearly have not released any spiritual attack, so how could you not be affected? Pei Shenghai exclaimed in shock. Indeed, he could not believe this. Spiritual attacks could cancel each other out, but Ling Han had clearly not sent out any spiritual attack, so how could he be completely unaffected? Ling Han smiled slightly. Who said I was not affected? He had still been pained, but now that his tolerance had greatly increased, and with his incredibly strong willpower, he only experienced pain for a short while. His battle prowess would not be reduced because of this. This was called being affected. Pei Shenghai was speechless, But when he saw that Ling Han's other hand had already balled into a fist that was about to fly towards him, his heart turned cold. He hurriedly loosened his grip, and he did his best to retreat as much as possible, while exerting force through his feet. This opponent was too frightening, absolutely not someone Pei Shenghai could stand against. Now that you have attacked me, you still wish to retreat completely unscathed? Ling Han shook his head, his steps light. He seemed completely unhurried, but he was sticking closely to Pei Shenghai's tail. He had just not thrown a punch yet. Pei Shenghai's face had turned completely pale. What kind of monster was this? His power, speed, and spirit had all surpassed the level of fifth heaven, and even overwhelmed him completely. Yet Ling Han did not move all this while, and Pei Shenghai finally relaxed. He should be holding reservations because of Lord He, right? True, what kind of being is he? A peak stage 7th heaven supreme monarch star whose evolution index has even soared to 12. Who would not be afraid of this kind of character? Lord He only needs to take one more step, and he will be able to do as he likes in the Celestial King graveyard. If he becomes a 9th heaven Celestial King, he will definitely become an absolutely invincible existence. Looks like you know what's good for you. Lord He. Pooh. Pei Shenghai was just about to say a few words to keep up appearances, yet had not anticipated that Ling Han would suddenly deliver a punch, crushing his head directly. His mind was instantly destroyed, so it was natural that he was completely dead. A series of sharp inhaling rang out in the area. This guy was really decisive and resolute. Pei Shenghai had already revealed his backer, but Ling Han had still moved without hesitation, not giving face to even he. He is an absolutely extraordinary character. This guy is indeed extraordinary. But a 5th heaven actually wants to match a peak stage 7th heaven supreme monarch star? No matter what, that cannot be possible. That's right. Even if this guy's evolution index has reached 12, there is no way to compensate for the gap of 2 cultivation levels. He'll just be waiting for Lord He's fury to tear him into pieces. Everyone was not optimistic about Ling Han, and shook their head. Even those peak stage 7th heaven elites did not step out and say anything. In any case, once he was here, Ling Han would simply become a dead body. But how could they have known that not only had Ling Han's evolution index reached 12, he had also obtained an invincible body art? This was the true basis for his confidence. Ling Han returned to his original spot and sat down, waiting patiently for the celestial fruit to ripen. He was determined to obtain this celestial fruit. He only needed 1/5, or even 1/10, and he would have the confidence to attempt breaking through to the 6th heaven, and after he crossed this threshold, it would be no issue for him to match a 9th heaven Celestial King when he channeled both his body art and power of regulation at the same time. He should only need 5 years, at most, or so he secretly estimated. Even Pei Shenghai had practically been insta-killed, so it was naturally impossible that there would be anyone else that would go and provoke Ling Han again or covet the Empress. Even if they did, they could only keep their thoughts to themselves. Time passed quietly, and Gu He did not appear. It seemed like he would not appear before the celestial fruit ripened. Ling Han was unconcerned as well. At present, his only priority was the celestial fruit. He only had to ascend to the 6th heaven, and no matter who his opponent was, he would be able to suppress them. And in this manner, for years past. On this day, the fragrance emanating from the celestial fruit became extremely strong, causing everyone's pores to expand and dilate, and making them feel as if they were floating on air. A supremely valuable celestial fruit, a supreme great herb. Ha! Following a loud laugh, a figure in green streaked forwards from the distance. At first, he was still a boundless distance away, but in the blink of an eye, he instantly appeared at the side of the lake. Everyone was filled with reverence because this old man in green was enshrouded in 8 ribbons of iridescent light. The celestial fruit was close to ripening, and the powerful figures had finally appeared. Chapter 2635 Deliberately Come to Kill You. Chapter 2635 Deliberately Come to Kill You. I, Fu Yuhai, will accept this greenish-black flowing ripple fruit. The celestial king in green laughed loudly, directly stretching out his hand to snatch the celestial fruit from the center of the lake. "Brother Fu, you are too greedy!" A voice rang out, but a golden light had already shot over, heading towards Fu Yuhai. Boom! This large hand was immediately ripped apart, but the golden light was erased as well. "Miao Tsangyu?" Fu Yuhai asked coldly, looking in a specific direction. "Xiao!" With a flash of golden light, another eighth heaven celestial king appeared. He was only 3 feet tall, and was a dwarf, but no one dared to underestimate him. His vitality was bubbling like multiple furious dragons. It was probable that any of these dragons was capable of casually suppressing any 6th heaven celestial king. This dwarf was Miao Tsangyu. He cast an eye on the surroundings, and then cackled. "Diou, Shueqinbai Rongwenlin, what are you all cowering for? Could it be that you people want to sit on the sidelines and take advantage of us?" As his words fell, 3 figures immediately shot over. They were all 8th heaven celestial kings, and their aura was shocking. They were all 8th heaven celestial kings, only a single step away from the pinnacle of the celestial king tier. But the last person was slowly walking here from the horizon. His hands were crossed behind his back. Every step was extremely elegant, but no matter how one looked at it, he exuded the air of a show-off. 7 ribbons of iridescent light wrapped around him, proving that he was only a 7th heaven celestial king, yet he was capable of standing equal to 8th heaven celestial kings, so he was indeed qualified to show off. No, Guhui! Ling Han's eyes narrowed. He stood up. Guhui, Xiaoying Xiong, and Miao Hua were the 3 people that he wanted to kill the most at present. "Since we are all gathered now, let us decide whom the greenish-black flowing ripple fruit belongs to now," Miao Tsangyu said. "Since there are 6 of us, each of us will claim a 6th. How about it?" "No!" Guhui shook his head. "I want half." "You!" Miao Tsangyu and the others all glared. This guy was demanding half from the get-go. Then didn't that mean that they could only each claim a 10th? "You have all reached the peak stage of the 8th heaven. A 10th of the celestial fruit would be enough to help you to break through to the 9th heaven," Guhui stated calmly. He was the one at peak stage 7th heaven. To say nothing of only 1 greenish-black flowing ripple fruit, even if there were 10, he would not be complaining that there were too many. "Humph, what if we fail on our first attempt?" Diao Yu asked coldly. "Then I want half myself." "You're not worthy!" Guhui glanced at him, and then treated him with complete disdain. "How dare you!" Diao Yu glared furiously at Guhui. "What about it? Do you want to die?" Guhui scoffed. We all know that you are very strong and freakish, but there are 5 peak stage 8th heaven celestial kings here," Miao Tsangyu said, his gaze flashing. It was unknown what he was thinking about. Guhui laughed loudly. "For trash like you, even if 3 of you joined forces, you would still not be a match for me." "But there are 5 of us," Shueqinbai replied, but it was a tacit admission of how strong Guhui was. Guhui did not speak, but rather drew a sword directly. Immediately its cold light dazzled the heavens, so blinding it was a blur. "Celestial tool!" The expressions of Miao Tsangyu and the others immediately became bitter. Merely Guhui alone was capable of matching 3 peak stage 8th heaven celestial kings, and if there was a celestial tool thrown into the equation, he would not lose even if it was just him against 5 of them. "Fine. You win. If you want half, then half it is," Miao Tsangyu and the others all conceded. If it really came down to a battle, perhaps they could win, but it would definitely be a narrow victory. Furthermore, if they were struck by the celestial tool, they could not bear to imagine the consequences. Guhui was calm and nonchalant. Though he had forced 5 great 8th heaven celestial kings to submit to his will, he did not show a sliver of conceit. That was because this could not be any more normal in his eyes. He was a man that would become a heavenly venerate in the future, so what was the simple matter of forcing several 8th heaven celestial kings to submit worth? As expected of Lord He is truly mighty. Himself being a 7th heaven celestial king, he can manage to force 5 great 8th heaven celestial kings to submit to him. This is definitely something that would be known for generations. Everyone was extremely excited. Their blood bubbled hotly at this scene, each person looking at Guhi like an idol. The 6 great 8th heaven celestial kings all descended towards the center of the lake. Since the decision was made, it was now time for retrieval. Shwa! Right at this moment, a sword light swept past, so brilliant and blinding that everyone couldn't help but close their eyes. However, they immediately snapped open their eyes in fear. This was sword light. Wasn't closing their eyes just committing suicide? Sword light swept past, yet Guhi and company were forced to rise. They did not dare to continue descending on the center of the lake. A man with sword in hand stood on the banks of the lake, his black robes fluttering, as dashingly elegant as a deity. It was none other than Ling Han. Has this guy gone mad? Lord, he has not called him out for an accounting yet he actually dares to step out of his own volition. Furthermore, he has attacked 6 great elites all at the same time. Does he think that he is Lord He? Everyone felt this was unbelievable. They could no longer understand this world. The 6 great elites all turned to look at Ling Han at the same time, and when they saw that Ling Han was only a 5th heaven celestial king, they all looked surprised. This was too much of an exaggeration, wasn't it? Had he developed the courage of an immortal dragon? Yet Guhi laughed loudly. So it is you! I have deliberately come here to kill you! Ling Han stated indifferently. Should I call you Zhang San or Li Si? Guhi asked, unconcerned. Though Ling Han was more freakish than the former was, the latter had been scrambling around like a rat under the hot pursuit of Guhi, Xiaoxiong, and the other guy. How could Guhi take him to heart now? My name is Ling Han, Ling Han answered. No matter what your name is, since I have seen you, you are dying without a doubt today. Guhi's expression was completely disdainful, but when he said the last few words, he revealed an intense killing intent. This man was more freakish than Guhi was, so he had to be hiding a great secret. Guhi would kill him and take this secret for himself. However, I do not have the time to deal with you now, so just wait here for now. Guhi stretched out his hand and grabbed, and the heaven and earth manifested. He actually manifested a human figure. He then instilled a sliver of his divine sense within, and that figure made of regulations immediately filled up and became realistic. The human figure charged towards Ling Han. Boom! It was emitting an incredibly strong aura, and even an ordinary 7th heaven celestial king would feel fear at seeing it. Heavens, Lord, he is actually as strong as this. Simply drawing on regulations casually, inserting a sliver of his spirit, and it would possess battle prowess that could overwhelm a 7th heaven. The greatest prodigy! The greatest prodigy! Everyone was numb with shock. Even Niu Tsangyu and company were extremely wary. This young man was really too frightening. If he broke through to the 8th heaven, then the 5 of them added together wouldn't even be a match for him single-handedly, right? Why had that young man called Ling Han sought his own death? The strength of the 2 of them was not even on the same level, and now Guhi had to retrieve the celestial fruit first. Once he was free, eliminating Ling Han would only be a thought for him. Shwa, a sword light swept out, and that figure of regulations was already slashed in 2. Swaying and trembling, it wanted to put itself back together again, but with the rush of destructive power, it immediately turned into countless pieces. An existence that was capable of suppressing a 7th heaven celestial king had actually been eliminated with a single strike? Heavens! Everyone was grabbing their head, exclaiming in shock. They were completely incapable of believing their own eyes. Ling Han sheathed his sword, and stated evenly, I already said it, I have deliberately come to kill you. Chapter 2636 Fighting for the Celestial Fruit. Chapter 2636 Fighting for the Celestial Fruit. Previously, Guhi had come slowly, and everyone thought that he was a show-off. However, compared with Ling Han now, his showiness was practically nothing. Everyone looked at Ling Han, their eyes filled with confusion and respect. Of course, there was also contempt. After all, most people had already guessed that Ling Han and the Empress were both outsiders who had come here to train. How could a fifth heaven celestial king be as strong as this? Gu He also showed a hint of seriousness. Though that figure of regulations had only been something he had formed casually, it genuinely had the battle prowess of the peak stage of the seventh heaven, yet Ling Han destroyed it with a single strike. But he immediately looked disdainful. You are just depending on the might of your celestial tool. Miao Tsungyu and the other great eighth heaven celestial kings did not speak. Exchanging a look, they communicated secretly with their gazes. Once the two started fighting, the rest would snatch the celestial fruit. In that way, every single one of them could claim a fifth, which was double the amount that had previously been agreed upon. Ling Han walked forwards, rising into the air with every step, and standing level with the six great elites. Previously, even if everyone knew that he was very freakish, they would definitely not think that he could stand equal to Gu He, Miao Tsungyu, and the other elites, but nobody thought that way any longer now. This was the seventh big shot. Are you determined to seek death now? Gu He asked coldly. He was too displeased. The celestial fruit was right in front of his eyes, and obtaining it would send him right into the eighth heaven. For other celestial kings, this celestial fruit would only increase their cultivation level, at most, but would not be of much help in opening the great doors to the next cultivation level. However, it was different for him. He was a supreme monarch star, and the barrier to the next cultivation level could be claimed to be non-existent for him. I am just going to kill you! Ling Han's eyes were cold. If he asked himself honestly, he had never offended Gu He and company, but they had pursued him all the way into the Celestial King graveyard. Did they really think that he was an easy target to bully? Shameless boasting! Gu He retorted coldly, and suddenly threw a punch right at Ling Han. 1. Regulations condensed, turning into a giant hand in green that descended from the skies, smacking down on Ling Han. Ling Han's left hand balled into a fist, and fired at the skies. Pun! Space trembled, and that giant green hand was instantly shattered. Not so impressive, Ling Han said. Seeing this, everyone couldn't help but feel excited. Ling Han was indeed not inferior to Gu He. Heavens, that was only a mere fifth heaven celestial king! This was mad. This was absolutely mad. This had completely broken the iron rules of cultivation. A fifth heaven celestial king actually possessed battle prowess at the eighth heaven, no, at the peak stage of the eighth heaven celestial king tier. Couldn't he let others live? Letting you live for a few more days was truly a mistake. Gu He charged out. Previously, Ling Han had not been a match for him, and could only be severely injured when they clashed, fleeing in a panic. But Gu He had not found and killed Ling Han, which allowed the latter to break through to the fifth heaven, and gain the ability to pose a threat to the former. Haha, could it be that I have to thank you all for your kindness then? Ling Han scoffed. If it were not for the fact that he had a strong willpower and extraordinary strength, he would have long since been killed by Gu He and the company. It won't be too late to kill you now either. Gu He charged over, his divine sword already drawn without hesitation. He did not dare to underestimate Ling Han in the slightest. I'll return these words to you, shameless boasting, and I will add another few words, in your dreams. Ling Han also approached with the divine demon sword in hand. Ding! The two celestial tools clashed, and boundless ripples of murderous aura swept out with a boom, surging in all directions. Even eighth heaven celestial kings would be wary of this, and they all dodged. Ding, ding, ding! Pun, pun, pun! Two great elites, prodigies, freaks were exchanging blows endlessly, putting their strength on full display. They are actually equal! Everyone was stunned. Previously, Gu He had used bloodshed to prove his strength, and won the status of an elite, and now Ling Han was doing the same. He was using Gu He as a stepping stone, and becoming famous with a single battle. No, no, no. At present, it is only a contest of standard battle prowess. Neither of them have used any ultimate moves, so it is not definite who is stronger yet. I think it should be Lord He. After all, he has the advantage of cultivation level. I think it should be that Ling Han, since he dares to take the initiative to issue a challenge. How could he possibly have dared to step out if he had not had absolute confidence? I support Lord He. I support Ling Han. The two great prodigies were fighting madly, and the 5/8 heaven celestial kings were all smirking coldly. Their eyes turned on that greenish-black flowing ripple fruit that was below them. This was the time. They all moved, descending onto the surface of the lake. They wanted to snatch the celestial fruit. Shwa! Shwa! Two streaks of sword chi descended from the skies, slicing down towards them. These two flashes of sword chi had not been both delivered by the same person, but their might was chilling, and Niao Tsingyu and the others had no choice but to dodge. Otherwise, it was possible that even they would be killed. That was because the attacks had been delivered by celestial tools. Ling Han, Gu He. It was one matter for them to be fighting, but how could they possibly allow others to take advantage of their preoccupation? Thus, the moment Niao Tsingyu and the others moved, the duel moved without any prior agreement, assaulting the 5 great 8th heaven celestial kings. Damn it! Niao Tsingyu and the others were all cursing lowly. These two juniors were really too harsh. They were fighting, yet they were actually still guarding against them. Never mind! That's right. Since we have already offended them, what else should we be concerned about? The 5 of them pounced towards the celestial fruit. If they could use the celestial fruit to advance to the 9th heaven, then whether it was he or Ling Han, they could suppress the two of them with one hand behind their backs. Ling Han roared, throwing off Gu He, and bulldozed forwards with sword in hand. In comparison, it was definitely the greenish-black flowing ripple fruit that was more important. There was only one celestial fruit, and it would be gone if it fell into the hands of another. Gu He, though, could be killed at a later time. Gu He had the same idea. Brandishing his divine sword, he pounced directly towards the celestial fruit. He would take the celestial fruit first, and then kill Ling Han. In your dreams! Ling Han sneered coldly. Hi's sword swept out, directing a strike at Gu He. Die! Instantly, the whole area was in complete chaos. 7 great elites were all fighting one another at one moment, and they would be dashing towards the celestial fruit in the next, but that would then result in being ganged up on by the other 6 elites. It was fine if they did not make a move towards the celestial fruit. Whoever did would become the public enemy. Both Ling Han and Gu He had extraordinary strength, but in a situation when everyone else was their enemy, there was definitely no way that they could hold up while being ganged up on by 5 great 8th heaven elites. It was that case for them, what more for Niao Tsingyu and the others? The 7 of them were fighting an extremely intense battle, but it was a stalemate. None of them could become the first to break through. Wang Wen Wen! Multiple spiritual attacks were also being used. Everyone wanted to send the others into a dizzy state, and use that opportunity to pluck the celestial fruit, but 6 out of the 7 of them had grasped this kind of powerful move. It was definitely not anyone that could suppress all those around him. Fight, fight, fight. Fighting until even the skies darkened, fighting till ghosts wailed and gods howled. The spectators were not even worthy of watching the battle among 7th heaven celestial kings at close quarters. They had no choice but to retreat further and further. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. Time was passing by slowly, and the battle among the 7 great elites still did not have a result. Ling Han was fuming. He had no wish to just continue the battle endlessly like this. Releasing a battle cry, he channeled the indestructible heaven scroll. Multiple golden seals appeared on his body, pushing his defense level to an unbelievable level. Die! Ling Han rushed towards the celestial fruit, and this instantly attracted the fury of the 6 great elites. They all rained a mad barrage of attacks on him. Too bad, Ling Han was practically indestructible at this moment. He could withstand even a few blows from a 9th heaven celestial king. Pun pun pun! Countless attacks exploded on him, but Ling Han's speed became even faster in his charge. He stretched out a hand and grabbed at the celestial fruit. You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.